I changed the whole thing. After 14, we sat down, me and the coaches, and they challenged me. We came up with fight night. We made them beat the crap out of each other. So that when it came to their semi-final, which was their final, they were a length down, and I'd blacked out. And to this day, I still can't believe they did what they did. I remember thinking at the barrier, that's it. I haven't done it. I failed to rewire their brain. P course of falling. We went through them like a knife through butter. And I was like, bloody hell, we're in front. I literally don't remember that bit. I was thinking, am I going to be a postman or a dustman on Monday? And I was like, I can't be a dustman because it's too smelly, so I'll be a postman. That was literally like that minute between the barrier and falling. I was like, wow, we're in front. Connie called the move early, and they just went straight through that crew.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to Last Stroke Counts. We've got an absolute legend of rowing in the house today. We've got Ben Lewis, and gear up for a really interesting chat. Nice to have you on the show, Ben.
Thank you for having me. Flattered.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm excited personally. Obviously, you've coached me in the past in a number of different forms. Also, just looking at your career, just from where you've rowed and coached at. So rowing at Teddy's, Brookes and Leander, and then coaching, like you said, all three of those. You then had a stint at Williamson in America and came back Molesey. And also was definitely about Thames Royal Club and the impact that you had there. But yeah, great to have you on. Looking forward to the chat. And as we normally start with everyone, really, it's how you got into rowing yourself.
I had into rowing. I hated cricket.
Yeah?
Very, very strong aversion to cricket. It was too slow. I was a big swimmer, rugby player, athletics at prep school. And they said, you're going to do cricket when you go off to Teddy's? And I was like, no, I'm going to row. I didn't know what rowing was. I had no intention of enjoying it or getting into it. I just was going to make a point. I didn't like cricket.
That's a good one.
And I turned up and I started learning to row in old tub fours, not that far from here. I absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
Miserable. This was when we had proper winters. You had none of the nice kit you have now. You know, you had a sort of one rugby jumper and you're sitting there. It was just, and proper cold winters. It was just abject misery. And then I won my first pot at Thames Regatta in May 1993, and that was it.
That was the turning point.
Kind of hooked, yeah. I think winning a pint tankard, that was it. It was just the coolest thing I'd ever done.
Yeah, the what you win in rowing is pretty cool. I remember I first won at Wallingford when we got given a hip flask.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good one.
Talk about encouraging kids to maybe not behave the right way.
Yeah. But then also, you win the tankard and you think it's going to be really cool to drink a beer out of this. And then you drink a beer out of it and you have that taste of pewter.
Well, this was crystal. It was a crystal.
Oh,
okay. The only crystal one I've ever got. And unfortunately, it's died of death. It went through the dishwasher too many times. Yeah, you end up getting lead poisoning.
I got that glass from Boston Head. When I was at school, I was literally, me and one other guy were the only guys good enough to go and trial at Boston. We did that for a couple of years. No one else ever went up there. And then in my final year, my coach said, right, we're all going to do Boston because you all need to understand how miserable it is. We can't just have two of you leaving school not knowing what a miserable event it is. So he took everyone up there to do the Boston Head.
It is pretty bleak.
Yeah, it's not much going on there. Cool. So Teddy's. And then, so you got the bug for it at Teddy's?
I mean, it was a love-hate relationship. Nature was about it. I started out and I got put in the A's. God knows why. I think it was because I'd come back from skiing. And it was really interesting. He did a battery of gym tests. Now, Teddy's in the 80s and 90s were really good. They were always winning medals at the age groups of 14, 15, 16s, and they were often in the medals in the champades. Mm-hmm. And this guy, they had a really good system. Mike Rosewell died recently, absolute legend, and he was there for about 25 years and really took it from nowhere to the first school to win the triple in 1984, which is a nice, interesting little tidbit. And we did a battery of gym tests, and one of them was jumping over. You put your hand on the bench and you had to jump over it. And I'd just come back from skiing. I thought, I'll do this. I got double the number everybody else did. And I was just bouncing off my toes, going as fast as I could. And I remember the coach looked pointing at me. And I ended up in 2C, and we won unbeaten, won national schools, last ever J14-8s.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, last ever.
So you're still
completely lopsided.
You're still the reigning.
I'm reigning Simon City. Yes, absolutely. Still the reigning champion, 30 years on. My dad took loads of photos and hadn't put a bloody film in the camera. So I don't think there's any record of it anywhere. Then I was 6th seat by J15, and then Mike Rosewell realised I loved it and stuck me in the stroke seat. And I did sort of still hate it. And he walked up to me one day and said, "You've got a good oar and you pull hard." So, bloody hell. And at that point, I kind of accepted it.
Someone sort of believed in you.
Yeah, and that was it. And I broke my shoulder in the lower 6th and didn't do very much, skiing too fast, and then was captain of boats in the upper 6th and stroked a pretty good first day.
Nice.
But it made quite a big impact, I think, on me. It was really good fun down at the boat club. You weren't on first name terms with the teachers, but you weren't far off, and it was relaxed, but you were there to work.
We've discussed before about rowing. It's certainly at a young age, there's a level of freedom that you don't get in many other sports. Like back when I was at school, even if you're going to play rugby or football on the field, you will wait for the teacher and walk down the road together, and you wait at the gate, and it's all very like set up. And then you go rowing, and it's like 14 of you get stuck in singles and piss up off the river. And it's a sense of freedom I think you don't get from other sports, which is an attraction. But also I think for everyone it's love-hate, because
it hurts.
It hurts. The pressure, the nerves are horrible when you're a kid as well, dealing with those big events and stuff. Oh.
The first time, my first regatta, I went to the loop 20 times at Thames before I heat. I was terrified of catching the crab. I couldn't have been more scared if I was going over a top on the Somme. I mean, it was abject terror.
Yeah.
Absolute terror.
But then I think the reason why you keep coming back is because you prove yourself you can do it. At the end, you race, whether you win or lose or anything, you're like, it wasn't awful. I didn't die.
I'm still alive.
Jesus, I did.
No one's died.
Yeah. Like, hang on. Like, maybe I don't have to listen to that fear. Like, maybe I can do a bit more than I think.
And you get a pint tankard at the end of it if you were the best.
Yeah, as opposed to a crappy little medal at the football or the cricket.
If that, yeah.
Cricket as well, I hated, because I went to quite a small school. So even from like 15s and 16s, we were just stuck together with the 18s. So I remember some 18-year-old kid finding it hilarious, just firing,
wanging the ball.
Yeah, just like absolutely fearing my life. I was a little bit less scared of drowning, I guess. Awesome. So, and then from Teddy's, was where you went to uni, did rowing have an effect on where you wanted to go?
I was going to go to UL. I was going to go to UL, but I didn't do very much work, and I got taught all the wrong stuff in 2 subjects, and didn't get very good A levels. I had some good links from Teddy's to UL, but I couldn't get hold of them when I was on holiday in Greece. And I started going out to Leander in about late August that summer. Chap, the head of the boat steer above me, a guy called Colin Swainson, was down there, and why don't you come down? So I went down there for a little bit, and I've been down there in the autumn, actually, the spring of that year. Redgrave lent, they were talking about who won the school's head. I've never forgotten this. Redgrave was leaning over me. So, yeah, who won the school's head, by the way? And I wanted to go, "Me." Didn't say a word. Go on to my mate. I think in my head, go on, just say it was him, say it was him. He didn't say a bloody word. That was my moment of glory. But it was if I'm honest, it was a bit of a shambles. Not the setup it is now, not in a million years. It was still really amateur. There was basically Jurgen's 4.
Yeah.
And a few others. And then it was just a bunch of club rowers.
Yeah.
And then I was out on the Lash in Oxford with some mates, actually mostly Abingdon, old Abingdon boys I knew from rowing, and we bumped into a load of Brookes boys on a night out. A guy called Phil Baker, who, I don't know, many of your viewers probably won't know him now. Absolute legend of a guy, Temple ladies winner at Brookes, multiple world medalist in lightweight eights. And he said, "Come down to Brookes." And I was like, "How does that work? I'm not a student." "Doesn't matter, it's an open club. Come down." I said, "How does that work?" "It doesn't matter, just come down." So I went down, and I thought, actually, this is quite fun. And it's a half the drive from Oxford down to Leander. So I planned to have a gap year rowing. I thought I can travel, instead of doing the standard gap year, go and work in Australia and cutting sheep's balls off or whatever.
Yeah.
I thought I could do that anytime. I wanted to keep rowing. And I went down, and it was Rhodey Douglas, Steve Williams, Fred Scarlett. It was awesome.
Some big names.
It was a proper in the deep end business. It was, some days I was in the novice eight, some days I'd be rowing with the top guys, and it was you turn up and I was, what am I going to be in today? What am I going to be in today? And I just kept turning up.
It's interesting that you say that Brookes was an open club. I didn't realise that it was back then. I thought one of the big changes, or certainly what I noticed, was when tourists became a bigger thing, and they managed to, I guess, like that sort of point when I got into the teams from about 2010, maybe slightly earlier, were like retaining athletes after they'd finished at Brookes.
Always been the way. We rode as Bowerbridge actually that year at Henley. We won the Brit as Brookes and won the Y-Folds as Bowerbridge, and I was in the Thames Cup 8, which made the final.
Okay.
Lost to the London Rowing Club.
Okay, yeah.
I was the youngest guy on the boat by about 20 years. Eric Sims was at 3.
Yeah.
Simon Beresford was at 6. I was at 7. That was a proper
Simon Beresford, is that, what's his nickname? Not Monkey.
Frankie.
Yeah.
Frankie.
And then
there are other nicknames as well, but I got on with Simon. I teased him, and I think he quite liked that. I didn't take any shit.
And then obviously Eric Sims, yeah, we were bumped into him the other day at Met Regatta.
It was a good bridge from schoolboy rowing to proper men's rowing.
It's such a difficult...
In the deep end, properly in the deep end.
It's a difficult thing to do, isn't it? I remember when they talk about Sachi in his final year at school, rowed at Leander.
Yep.
Had a great year, but then went back to try and make a junior boat and didn't do very well because he'd already started rowing like a man and just couldn't get back rowing, and that's just boys thing.
Patience, just a bit more patience on the whole thing. Slow it down.
The time on the slide is time wasted.
Yeah.
Cool. So from Brookes then, so close, some finals, but not medals, or a bit of a mix?
I mean, looking back now, and they're some of my best friends still. We never actually won. Yeah, I was at Thames Cup final, and then 3 Temple finals, all in a row, all to American universities, all on the outside station.
Yeah.
Things that we probably could have done better as a crew, things Richard could have done better. Learned quite a lot that way.
You learn
a hard school of hard knocks, I suppose. But looking back, I mean, it was I loved it. I think, again, didn't do a stroke of work. That wasn't why I was there.
Yeah.
Trained in the cowshed, which if you go down there now and you see the setup, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's up there with the American programs, and I think they get more out of their athletes than any other program in the world, probably.
Yeah,
back then, I think it was probably not. It wasn't dissimilar. What they managed to squeeze out of everybody without all the telemetry and all the rest of it. No money. We trained with concrete blocks attached to the end of weights bars, but it was what you did with it.
I think mindset, and I think it's interesting if you think about so many of those names that you've named, the people rowing in that environment have gone on and been successful in rowing and in coaching. And obviously Henry Belhash is the mastermind now.
You got Moff. I mean, Moff doing a very good job at Teddy's. I mean, there's probably loads I could think of, but it's Richard's had a huge impact on British rowing, the sort of ripples that guy's created, and the people, because we're not sort of the people that are going to go and work in the city and be hedge fund managers for the most part. It was a great environment. I mean, we did, train hard, we did party hard.
In that scene, but that seems to be the magic thing, isn't it? In terms of how they get results against clubs that are maybe taking things a little bit too seriously.
There was a lot of passion. Richard, everyone just copied, Richard was the leader, and we did our rows with him, but there was something, it was inspirational, to be honest.
Yeah, we spoke to a few Brookes, like Susie Deer, spent a bit of time at Brookes, and her comments really was like it was a team, and everything you did for the team. And actually, because we sort of asked her what was it like going from Brookes to Leander, she said one of the weirdest things was to actually start doing things for me, like for my own benefit, for my career.
Absolutely.
Because she had just been absolutely, it's Brookes first, and nothing else matters.
And then you go, a lot of people then move on to Leander when they've kind of exhausted maybe what they can do at Brookes, and you go to Leander more for the individual attention and all the rest. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing to look at. Cool. So then you'll move to Leander?
Well, I was in the States for 2 years as a freshman coach at Williams. I was going to join the army, and I thought at the end of Brookes, I needed a bit of a break because it'd been fairly intense. I thought I'd go because I studied in the States on an exchange program.
Okay.
I wanted to get out of Oxford, been at Teddy's, been at Brookes, and I wanted to just go somewhere a bit different. And I realized, so I went on an exchange program to Rhode Island, University of Rhode Island, and I realized that people there coaching didn't know their arse and their elbow.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll do that before Sandhurst. I'll have a year out, do some skiing. I wanted to go to like Vancouver or Seattle or somewhere, have a bit of fun, a bit of traveling, and then I'll go to Sandhurst. And I loved it out there at Williams, and I think I came back in debt. I earned so little money.
Yeah.
But it opened a door, and I went back the following year because a certain Mr. Partridge that I used to, similar terms with him, was doing very well, and I had itchy feet to row again, and it all broke out in Iraq, and I thought, bugger that, I'm not dying for Mr. Blair and Mr. Bush.
Yeah.
And I had it, so I went back for another stint and got myself fit, and learned quite a lot. I had a very good crew the first year. Following year, a bunch of midgets, and I learned a lot about horsepower that year. You've got to have it, or it doesn't matter how well they row, they ain't going to go anywhere.
So that's coaching at Brookes.
That was, no, it was coaching at Williams.
At Williams, sorry, still at Williams.
2 years at Williams, and then I went back to the UK in about mid-May 2004, and I said to Richard, I want to come and row for you for the summer. He found another bloke. I'd actually equalled my PB training on my own, and he didn't really need me, and I ended up down at Leander. Got asked to jump into a 4, and I'd beaten all these guys the year before, 2 years before, in 2002. They'd won the Thames, and I'd been to school with one of them. There was Pete Gosling, Chris Lloyd, and I got asked to, would you jump in this 4? All right, and I thought, oh, this is going to be pretty rubbish. It was absolutely superb. Bloody hell, these guys can row. And yeah, would you do our, rowing R8 at the Met? Okay, fine. And then a couple of weeks later, I was still turning up, and I was still in the middle of this 8, and it was pretty good. And okay, right, you're in our crew for the ladies' plate. Oh, right, okay. And we didn't even have 8 blokes. we had to wait on a guy who I was at Brookes with to come back from the team. So kind of just one of those funny things. It just happened totally organically.
Is that the year where did you make the final?
No, we won it.
You won it, yeah. So this is the year where there's 10 names on the board.
No, they didn't do that back then. No, this was 04.
Someone was ill.
No, that was 02. That was the Tennis Cup. So that was a bunch, about 4 of the same guys. In fact, I think it was N pairs. Rick Edgington got in the team. A couple of guys quit. I think it was the N pairs of the Thames Cup 8. Although they were certainly the N pair in our play. Sereth Colbert, who was a dentist, Pete Gosling, stroke, and Gibbsy and Lloydie were at bow, and then there was 4 other guys and Jet Mead. So I went to school with Toby behind me. He was at Teddy's with me. Joe I was at university with, and then another chap he was way older than all of us, who'd been in Goldie in 1992.
Oh wow!
But that boat, I learned a lot actually from that. Like obviously it won, which is quite cool. But I remember Rob Morgan was coaching it, Philippe Salbani, Banksy would turn up every now and again. And I remember chatting to Rob, and he said boats go or they don't. And the amount of cover that boat could get at 40 was, I've always used that as a benchmark. It was a fast boat, and it was the same shell you won Henley in.
Was it?
Yeah, that old 5-stay.
That's a good boat.
Yeah, that's done very well, that shell. Ladies playing 2 Thames, 3 Thames Cup wins.
Yeah, because it won the year before as well.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, no, it just that worked. I don't think we ever had a bad outing. It never went on. It maybe rose into spectacles. I don't know, but I remember looking back. It was then my only other unbeaten season. It's a shame. We beat Cambridge at Marlow that year. They won the boat race. We beat them by about a length without our best bloke in the boat.
Nice.
Did 5:40 in dead still, which is quite fast back then.
I always thought for a long time I was kind of the last man in the boat, and it's really stressful and difficult because you're always watching your back and having to really perform above to your highest standard because you know everyone else is. And I remember for a long time being like, I wish I could just not be the last guy in. And then you realise towards the end of your career, when you're one of the first guys in, you're running with guys who aren't as good as you.
You want to be the last bloke.
So yeah, the golden bit actually is being last man in.
The following year, I was in the first day for the Head. I was the only club guy in the boat. Well, me and Tommy did row the World Championships. But I remember I was at Bow, and I thought, okay, I'd never really rowed at Bow. I'd done a bit at Brookes, but I thought, okay, this is it. You're the worst bloke in this boat. Go on, Mark, don't cock it up for Christ's sake.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's a fun place to be. Stressful, but it's good to row in that kind of level.
Steve came up to me because that year in 05, over half the boat had been at Brookes. Me, Tommy, Steve, Langers. It was basically the bones of the Beijing 8. For the most part. And Steve, I'd known Steve for quite a few years.
Steve Williams,
and we were in the boathouse at Hammersmith, and I was sort of skinny. I looked like a 16-year-old. I was so skinny. And he came up to me, then, Richard's watching, don't fuck this up. I was expecting major words of wisdom, but that was all I thought was pretty sound advice, really. So I just sat there at bow and didn't work too hard. And when I did try and work too hard, 20 strokes out, boat went off balance. Right, don't do that again. And we won by about a second.
I remember my first under-23s did the 8. Everyone else in the 8 had been to Junior Worlds, and I'd not done anything at juniors. And I remember Belhash making a point of that.
And nice doing.
I think he was trying to make. I can't remember. I was just struggling with the nerves of that anyway. And he basically, I think the point was like, you've all been here before. You've all done this. You all know what you're doing. You've all been to a world champs, apart from you, Tom. I was like, oh, but yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, we've got to take about that ace head. How was that then to row in? Like,
we had 2 weeks. It was terrible. It was the worst rowing I'd had in years. They just come out of cab show. It was like a mental break for them, and it was awful. We got hammered by the A5 Blue Boat, who were world class. Probably could have won the Grand. Said had Hodge and Pete in it, they would have probably won the Grand. It was absolutely shocking. Day of the race, water was flat as anything, thank God. But we went out for the pre-paddle, and I was like, oh my God, this is what international rowing's like. It was just a completely different crew. And it was awesome, and we went off first. I was first man down the track, and I have to say that was one of the coolest things I've done in a rowing boat. It was 70 degrees. You got Olympic champion at stroke, and we led the whole flotilla off, and it was like a mill pond from Barnes Bridge. And I mean, winning Henley's obviously is pretty cool, but winning the Head is actually harder to do because there's only one crew each year that can do it. Yeah, and that was a really, really cool experience. It has to be said. The lad, Ian Lawson in front of me, he missed the entire front end. His back would come flying towards my handle. I just wanted to get it out of the way, but no, leave it out there, and I just miss it. But he'd dip it in, dip it out.
Biggest back as well.
But then what he did under the water was phenomenal. It was Josh West, who was 6'10" in a 3-seat, Tommy, I think Langers, Rick Edgington, Partridge, and Steve with Scrubber Coxon. And we won by absolutely not very much. A second or something, but
it's tough when you don't know where you are, dude.
I'll take it.
Oh, a win's a win.
Yeah, it was good fun.
I once went off first, but then one of the Tideways Super 8s beat us to it. Obviously, they would have.
2010? 9 or 10?
Yeah, something
9
like
or
that.
10, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, 10, no, because I was a Molesey in 10 and we won it. Like we won it in 10, so it must have been really annoying.
Yeah, but it would have been about, it would have made sense.
Because I saw them ahead of the Charles that year. Later on that year, I raced at the Charles, and they won that in the snow.
Yeah, I remember the snow. Yeah, cool. So, what year was this?
That was 05.
So then you raced in the summer in 05.
The ladies played, lost the final. We weren't very good. Lost to Goldie. Never went. It was about half the crew that won the year before, but it just did not. Just
it's elusive.
It was just a battle from the word go. Yeah. Whereas the crew the year before it just clicked. I remember we did say to Banksy, "Can we do the visitors?" I don't know how many of the crew are watching this, but no, you can't. And we would have probably won the visitors, given Tommy and Danny have won it about 12 times between them.
Yeah,
I think it would have been pretty hard to beat. But no, we wanted to retain the trophy, but we weren't fast enough.
How many has Danny Marriott got? Is it 7 or 8?
8.
8, yeah.
08. His 8th was in 08 in an 8.
And then in 09, I was part of the.
Yeah.
Is the only time he's ever lost down the track.
Yeah. Well, he win every other year, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was almost every other year.
I mean, we used to get billed as like the best
club
rower who never rode the GB. Yeah. I bumped him again not long ago. I went and fixed his rowing machine. It's quite good fixing rowing machines because you get to bump into it.
Well, he's a big kayaker now. He's done really well with Lawrence Plant, who's at school with Charlie Brereton.
Oh yeah,
runs athlete service or whatever. They came 6th at the Devisers Westminster.
Yeah, we fixed athlete services as well. Yeah, small world.
Very small world.
Who else was going to say? No, that was it. I think Danny from that. Like, yeah, it's funny because then there's that crossover from those guys. Because then so 05 you were rowing, and then
I stopped in the autumn, and I'd done the Hansa Cup. I was sort of on the edges of the team.
Yeah,
but come with a bust shoulder from skiing, bad back from when it went at school, one leg longer than the other from a rugby injury, and I thought I'm going to have to come in over the top of absolutely everybody to get in. And I was completely skint. I sort of put my coaching head on, and I just thought, this is going to be such a struggle. Maybe I just didn't want it enough. I don't know. I never will know. But I was sort of happy with what I'd achieved, and I didn't really have any choice. I had no money.
I mean, I'd say one thing I look back on, I think I always had the greatest respect for people who know when it's time to walk away, because there's nothing worse than watching someone hammer their body into the ground, and I think maybe that's something as well with Leander, especially when I was there, we're pretty honest with athletes, and would be like, listen, you're not going to make it. And I think as horrible as that is, it's actually nice to see someone just really grind themselves to do it.
I've had to have that discussion with athletes myself.
Yeah.
But it was a money thing, and I knew I was carrying injuries, and you know what Jurgen's program's like.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm not going to survive it.
Yeah.
With the best will in the world. I mean, Banksy was very complimentary about me, rode well, tough, good engine, but I was, wasn't made of glass, but there were serious issues there.
Yeah. I mean, that's
cut and stuck.
Well, yeah, from my perspective, I did the opposite. I limped my way, but I saw almost sort of run my body into the ground to get there. I limped in at the bottom and then just got put through the meat grinder for 2 years and got spat out the other end. And I'm glad I had a go, but yeah, like looking back, I guess it's certainly for like, if I was going to give athletes advice, like you don't want to just sneak in at the bottom at Caversham because you're going to have such a hard ride. You wait till you can punch in a little bit higher. How you started getting into coaching?
I've been coaching since I left school.
Yeah?
Yeah. I started coaching Teddies the day I left school pretty much. And then I did colleges all the way through Brookes because it's quite good beer money.
Yeah.
I do that when I could. I can't remember who I coached now, but I did quite a few colleges through Brookes. I was known as the pain machine at Somerville College. That was about 99, 2000, I think. Yeah, whole way through. I was then 2 years at Williams, and then I was funding my rowing at Leander, coaching.
Yeah.
But again, talking about I was injured and had no money. I've had enough money to live, but you can't. It's really difficult to row to the top level when you're coaching because you've got to be in two places at once, and you just can't do it. And so I kind of that's it, knocked it on the head. Which actually I felt fine with it. It wasn't until I was coaching probably the Plate 8 in 08. I thought, God, I wish I was back out there because I probably should have been in that crew. There was about good fun, good guys. And I was coaching colleges. I was doing 2 colleges at once, which was a bit contentious. And then I got asked, I was boatman at Abingdon for about a year. So I was coaching at Leander in the mornings because Philippe's dad was ill and he had to go to South Africa. Banksy had asked me in about April 06, would you come and coach our club guys, which was Josh, Daxie, Ed Barry, and Burkitt, little wife old 4. They weren't bad. They probably weren't going to win. Thames had a very good 4. And I think I was doing colleges or maybe Abingdon Boatman in the afternoon. And I was doing Abingdon Boatman in the afternoon. That's right. Leander in the mornings, and then Banksy carried that on so it would have been the 07 season. And I was off to Abingdon in the afternoons where I was the world's worst boatman. No idea how to get all the gunk going for it, but I had great fun trying to mix it up and all the rest of it. And then realised why boatmen talk so much when you go around because you're spent the entire day on your own. And then March 07, it became a full-time job because it was called the Freshers Coach.
Yeah.
And it was a GB thing. So it was me, Ed Green and Henry Balehatch were the first 3 Freshers coaches. And our job actually was to identify talent for the system, but I was already coaching a Thames Cup 8 that was going to win.
Yeah.
And he sort of did a bit of that on the side, a bit of recruiting, but not very much.
And how old are you at this point when you're coaching the Thames Cup 8?
I'd have been 27 or so.
So like not a lot
28.
older than most of the athletes you're coaching.
Not much.
Difficult dynamic or
more the Plate 8 because I was actually younger than quite a few of the following year. In 08 was harder.
Yeah.
I think that year in 07 I had a pair of James Ormond Lawson. It's tricky.
I remember that fair.
Yes. Nobody wanted them and ended up just kept kicking down the coaching ladder till it ended up with me.
They did not get on well with each other either.
Chris Collerton didn't want anything to do with it. Rob didn't want anything to do with it. So no, right, there you go, give it to Ben.
Both great guys, but yeah, that was a difficult dynamic.
It's a tricky one. I was coaching Tommy. I used to live with Tommy. I rode with Tommy. And it's really, I lived with Danny. Danny was okay. Tommy was hard work. Yeah, it is difficult. But I survived, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it helps. Like you've been doing it for so long. I think there's a certain point that anyone who gets to a high level, you have to learn how to coach yourself. Video analysis is coaching yourself. You can't become a good rower and not have some level. So it's not necessarily the coaching. I guess it's like you said, the other side of it, the management skills that's somewhere in coaches are quite often lacking. Well,
the Plate 8 in 08. That was a serious lesson in man management, and it did pay dividends down the line for sure.
You did a good. You happy with how you managed it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we won. Never
Well,
didn't
no,
kill each other.
Yeah.
No, it was. I sort of took the view. Look, there's, they all know what they're doing. I mean, a lot of them had, a lot of Henley medals.
Yeah.
And I only had one as a rower, one as a coach. But Henry Palmer and Danny were great mates of mine. I think Pete Randolph and Rick were the only two that hadn't won Henley.
Yeah.
But I asked Clive afterwards, how did I get on? And he said, it was, you were great because you let us have input. You gave us ownership, but but say, can we try this? Can we try that? And I'd say, yeah, let's try it. Somebody's going, no, we're not going to do it today. This is why.
Yeah.
So we got on, apart from the party incident in Banyoles, which you discussed with Dave, where Josh and Zoe were about to, Clive and Zoe got really uppity because they hadn't gone out.
Yeah.
And I remember having to manage that and send Josh. Josh was there giving all of that. Right, you out. And I had to take Clive and Zoe to one side and explain what happened, why they'd gone out, and all, because it was all still up in the air. No one knew what bloody boat they were in, and it was Ray Poulter, the Platate, and Tommy from the Grande. I think one of the best nights out I can ever remember. But I was meant to be the coach, and we had some beers in the pub, and it was the first night in Banyoles, I think, or second night, and I ended up. So it started out. I went out with Tommy and Henry and Danny, who were all friends of mine, which is, again, it's that tricky relationship.
Yeah.
But we went out, had a couple of beers, and then Josh, they got a message, we're in this other bar, and they were in there, and Josh was playing spin the bottle, hate the player, don't hate the game. And I thought, okay, this is escalating. I was all right, lads, I'm going home. I think you guys should go home as well. I can't force you, but I'd go home. I was walking back, I was about to go into the digs, and I heard this, it sounded like a ruddy football crowd, and I looked, so, oh God.
It was
right,
Josh.
And it was Ray Poulter standing, right. And I thought, I better go out with them because I might have to keep them out of prison. I thought, I don't know how. So I thought I was more there as a minder. That was going to be my excuse. Anyway, it was a fantastic night. And we rolled in at 4 a.m, and the next morning I woke up and I thought, that could be the end of your coaching career, Sunshine. I don't know how this is going to play out. Anyway, I was already going to Williams. I was going to go back to Williams. I'd already planned that.
Yeah.
And I did walk downstairs, and Colleton's walked straight up to me. Did you go out last night? Yep. And he stared at me as he can do, and he said, why? And I said, well, the lads are really peed off that they don't know what boat they're in. And he just said, bullshit or something, and off he went. And I thought, okay, well, we'll see how this pans out. And then obviously, luckily, the Playstate kept beating the Grande all week, which didn't hurt.
Yeah, and Josh giving them banter every time you.
Yeah, well, I think he still blames me for allowing Josh to undermine them.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, Josh was a bit of a character, but I also think like sometimes the best coaches understand that not everyone's the same type of person, and you can't treat them all the same. I mean, the great example that most people know is especially since the documentary came out about the Chicago Bulls winning 3 in a row and their coach letting Rodman occasionally go and have an absolute blast out and
vanish for days.
He would like disappear and come back, and like obviously you can't run a team like that with everything, and no one's saying that that's what you should do, but sometimes like the greatest skill of a coach is getting the most out of those different people.
On that, so Clive used to do that. Clive would disappear off, and he told me he was going away to earn money, taking Arabs abseiling with his marine skills, and I said, look, just bloody tell me and I'll cover for you with Banksy, right? Otherwise we're both going to end up, you don't know where your athletes are. And then with Josh, I remember, I think it was maybe in 07, Jez Moore was helping me with the Thames Cup 8 a bit, and I remember we had a discussion, me, Banksy and Jez in the bar, and I said to Banksy, is coaching an art or a science? That's a science, definitely. And I said, all right, what about managing Josh Davidson? Like, that is a dark art. Like, and the thing with Josh, I mean, I Josh and I go on very well. I work for him still now. I do a bit on the building site with him and with Webby. That, hands, body, slide, or knowing, what percentage you need, that's the easy bit. It is the management. Guys like Clive, Josh, some people are easy, but actually, as you get better, you need people that are a bit fiery. And they're going to maybe challenge you and ask you questions, and it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, and this is, I'm probably talk about it at Thames, certainly someone like Leander, it's a bit different because it was a high performance centre and all the rest of it, and they were very, single-minded, but didn't have many options of where else to go.
Yeah.
But it is easy to get it wrong, and if you come down too hard on that Platate, I kept them on a long leash, not a short leash. And Banksy said to me, and I remember watching your podcast with Dave, not long before Henley, he asked me to come down to Caversham, and he said, "You listen to your crew too much." So, and Brian does the same. I said, "Banksy, Danny Marritt's won Henley 7 times. Henley Palmer's won it 2. Manshire's won it 3. Josh has won it." It's like, I'd be an idiot not to listen. I'm not saying they rule the roost. No. It ended up, the buck stops with me. But I said, no. And he said, no, do it like Chris. Don't listen to your crew. And of course, there they were leading the Play 8 were leading Marlow Elite 8's final over the Grand 8 until 500 to go. And then suddenly, whoop, I only found out about 3 years ago, they'd thrown the race because they didn't want to get broken up. And Banksy, as soon as I remember cycling over the bridge near the finish line, and the phone rang, and it was Banksy. "Ben, what the bloody hell's going on with that Grand 8? And I said, "Well, the guy's been trying to tell you for the last 3 weeks. You've got the wrong guy in the stroke seat." Next day, they're out with Burkitt at stroke. And I've never forgotten that. But I mean, I learned a lot from Banksy, but that was, you don't listen to novices. I mean, but no. Jurgen would listen to his top guys, I'm sure. It doesn't mean he's necessarily going to act on it, but you take their experience and their information, and you sort of, okay, how does this, what am I going to do with this?
I mean, yeah, and also there's only so much you can know from the side. And if you know you've got good rowers, they're going to be, and if you know they're articulate and they understand what they're doing, they're going to be able to give you the view from the inside. Because what you see and what you feel can
well, up until about 2009, I used to regularly get in because I was still fit enough and young enough and not too fat. And that's why I jumped in your boat. I remember sitting there about thinking, bloody hell, I'd like to row in this boat. This is pretty good. And that's what I said to you guys in the dock. You're a lot better than you think.
I just remember getting hammered by you. But also at the same time, I remember all of us, we'd had a little bit of a difficult patch sort of between camps, like from Eights Head into the summer season. Brian had been unwell, or I think maybe it's his wife was unwell.
Lost half your crew pretty much.
Yeah,
taken away.
He'd spent some time away, so we were there with just sort of an assistant coach who maybe wasn't just quite as able to talk about managing us. So there was a weird period, and I think obviously we then lost to who we knew our main competition was going to be, and then head out on camp without Brian, and we were sort of a bit lost. And he definitely gave us a bit of purpose there. I mean, there's nothing going to get you up more for a training camp than losing to who you think you need to win to beat. So I think that gave us a lot of purpose. But yeah, no, I definitely I've always obviously a big guy. I've always had the physiology on my side. I probably struggled more with the technique of rowing, and I think like that moment there with you sort of like really just like drilling it into my head. And then I remember another point the next year when Chris Colleton coached me and Webby in the pair. He gained the same thing. He's after me doing donut. Like, I felt so bad for Webby. It's like, you're not even getting training done, mate. But just like forcing it into my head and like actually making the change. And like those two things, obviously Brian as well in terms of, but that's what I would attribute to like being able to get up to the under 23 level.
I remember that year you guys, the semi-final you were waving at the crowd, and in the final you were putting your blade in. You could have raced that race 10 times and you would have probably won it twice. They should have won. You guys were probably too stupid to know you should lose, but that's the underdog. Like, the pressure wasn't on you, and they definitely choked in the final.
Yeah, we spoke to John Collins about it.
Yeah, they did. And you guys just, sort of naivety can be, innocence can be bliss and all the rest of it. And you just went. The other thing I really remember, and it was interesting watching Dave's podcast, because he was, hands, body, slide. That's all I coach pretty much. I bore myself to death and my poor athletes. But Brian, I remember talking to Brian afterwards, and I said, Brian, you've got Kevin Harry a Henley medal. Yeah, it was amazing. And he said, I remember saying, you did square blades all winter. And he said, sometimes when you set out on a path, you've got to stick to it. Yeah, okay, I will jump. I often jump around a bit with crews, but I've never forgotten that. And okay, this is how we're going to row. This is why we're going to do it. And listening to Dave, I thought, yeah, that is bang on. I mean, Brian has been at it a very long time, and I find as a coach, the longer I do it, the more I'm just talking about the basics.
I just bumped into him at Met Regatta.
Brian?
Yeah. He was cycling past, literally doesn't look any different. No. Exact same setup. Still had his coaching watch on underneath his top. I was like, are you coaching anyone? I was like, oh no, I can't keep up anymore. On his bike still. Didn't recognise who it was, obviously. I look completely different to when I did when he was
really nice me. Guy.
Oh, just, total legend.
Yeah.
And to think, he was the performance director at UB Row.
Sort of headed the whole thing, didn't he? Yeah. Before handing over to David after Atlanta.
And he told me some stuff, like, I think he was the guy that basically, or was certainly involved in inventing a boat trailer that could go on a plane. Like they were like,
he was an engineer. I think he helped design Havisham as well.
Yeah, like just a total.
And just totally unsung hero, and won't hear anything of it. And
I'd love to. When I had posted a photo, and a couple of people messaged me and said you should get him on the podcast, and I was like, I'd love to have him on the podcast, but I just know that he'll be like, well, I haven't done anything good enough to talk about. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know I won't be able to convince him that what he has to say is good enough, but it like, of course it is.
No, he's like a sort of Merlin, the old wizard.
He would just never admit that it was. He'd never take any credit. He'd always push it back to you. You know, you guys did the rowing. I was never in the boat.
Sachi went on to an Olympic gold medal, and Brian, probably helped a big part of getting him on that right path.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, like drilling that thing into us. It's funny that you say about me waving at the crowd on the Saturday, because if I row on the ergo, what's the thing I'll do? What do you always pick up on I always do wrong? I'll just dropping my hands into the front, aren't I?
Oh, waving the blade up there.
Yeah.
Right.
Still, it's forever.
Got around the ergo the way you'd round the boat.
Forever will be the thing that I struggle with, which is just dipping hands into the front. But yeah, I guess we got it right in the day.
Go back to your J14, J15 coach, maybe. You've got to iron it out.
Yeah, that's
you get that thumbprint, and it sticks in you unless you can really rewire your brain.
Yeah.
But as you said, you're a big guy, and that's why the lightweights row so well. The bigger you are, I think, the more it takes longer for the singles. No, but it takes longer for the signals to get there, and it's harder to be coordinated the bigger you are.
Yeah. It's like the double-edged sword, isn't it? It's great to be big, and it's great to have a long back and long levers, but then also that leads to like back injuries and all sorts. It's part of it, isn't it? Awesome. So yeah, that's cool. I mean, also, yeah, for me, like that, obviously that year was incredible. Like the fact that we then had 2 crews win, and we all went out that night, like 18 guys.
I remember it very much.
I found
a great photo, actually. I meant to send it to you.
18 guys who'd all been training all year went and won Henley. Like that was just, it's not going to happen very often, is it? That's
shame we didn't quite get the triple with the grand.
Close.
Canvas, yeah.
Was it a canvas on the
canvas on the Saturday? Yeah. Canadian under 23s, I think.
Yeah. That would have been ridiculous.
They'd done their homework. They knew that grand eight couldn't get out the blocks.
Okay.
Front loaded it and hung on.
Fair enough.
Because the plate tape were very, very dynamic. Very dynamic. They weren't that big, but they would beat the grand eight over 6 to 8 250s, and that's when Josh would say, "We beat you. You go and talk to Colletons, and we beat you by more. Why are you going and talking to him?"
Oh, I feel that was
just let Josh get away with it.
I remember. Every time you come downstairs, like in the evenings, be Colleton having some real tough conversations with certain people, and it was just like you could feel the tension.
Well, it didn't go. Tim, I've won Henley a few times now as a coach, and actually I think every boat you've kind of known by about May or even earlier, you've got it. It just, they go. And when you're shuffling deck chairs in the Titanic, well, they were with that Grand 8, and I've had that, and you're sort of trying to find more. Boats go or they don't. And I think every single one I've had pretty much has just gone. And you've kind of just, you've known early on, and then it's okay, don't screw it up. Very rarely, and the pieces are generally all there. Yours was a bit of an exception because I did come through quite late on, but you done all the training.
Yeah, but then that exactly what I would accredit to Brian, like the early work. We spent so long on the basics that when it then came to add speed,
I remember a coaches meeting, Banksy saying those guys can't row in anything smaller than a Cox 4. Wouldn't let you in pairs, wouldn't let you Coxless. The main thing was Cox 4 and 8. He said they'll get worse, and I've never forgotten that because you were so raw. You were such a raw group.
Yeah, I mean,
he said if we go in pairs, they'll probably end up getting worse.
I bumped into Ollie Partridge again at Met, and we were talking about it, and he was saying it's funny because he's now the old man of where he rows at Monmouth, but he was like, I was the old man then at 24.
It's my cousin.
Yes, he did say that. Yeah,
cousin Ollie.
He was the old man at 24. I think there was, 6 of us were sort of first or second years out of juniors, so it was pretty awesome project to be a part of.
But out of that group, I suddenly realised, I was thinking about last night or this morning, Phelan and Sachi, Olympic champions in Rio, and Zoe got a silver.
Yeah.
It was a pretty the amount of Henley members in that group as well is
Henley members pretty huge. Davy Jones, under 23 gold.
Yeah.
Ray Poulter did under 23s. I did. Dave's gone on, done some FISA and stuff like
boat race.
Yeah, boat race, ladies plate squad.
It was also a proper club group as well, because it was still, guys had jobs, proper jobs, guys were still out on the beers. I think that 08 was a bit of the end of an era actually for Leander. I think it became the club guys became more serious after that.
I think
You were there,
had
so you
to
could
be.
probably tell me.
That was it. It was a time when I felt like we had a Leander squad, and then through under 23s I really struggled. Sachi very quickly got picked up, and I was initially in a pair with him. I got a back injury, and then he sort of got picked up quite quick and went up into the team in like 11, wasn't it? So like 10, 11, it was just like didn't seem to be that many people around.
No, it was a bit of a lull, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we were sort of struggling, especially like to trial and stuff, like struggling to pick someone up. And then, I mean, it is what it is.
I think it lost a bit of the atmosphere. That was the sense I got, because I was still, in touch with people. I got the feeling that some of the fun had gone out of there a little bit.
I felt a sense, maybe it's just because of where I was. I sort of felt a bit, a sense of like, there were a few of us all there all year, like working our ass off. And then at the end of the year, it was just celebrated a whole bunch of athletes that were Leander members that had won at Henley but didn't train at Leander. And then sort of every year we'd have a couple other people would sort of join at the end of the year, then go to under 23s. And then it would be like, oh, look, like these 7 athletes have done well at under 23s. And I'd be sat there being like, well, where were they at Leander all year?
Yeah.
And it's just, you can't blame
Transactional.
Leander. Yeah, you can't blame Leander for wanting to celebrate, wanting to get hold of athletes and stuff. But from being on the ground at that time, it was like, I wish they were here. Like, if we're going to like celebrate them, I wish they were here for me to row with. But it's difficult because also, like you say, that was a period where everything in terms of professionalism, like really exploded. It got to the point where people could do the career of a British athlete was lasting longer. It wasn't just like, can you do 2-3 years at Kelsham, get your medal and disappear? People are doing 2, 3, 4 multiple medals. Like, I guess it was a sense of like, we need to get more serious.
Well, it was building up to London as well, wasn't it? I mean, that was a big part. I was at Molesey at the time, and it was, it was getting very, very serious and very professional. Things did change, I think, on the club scene. A lot of things started changing around then. I couldn't tell you exactly what or why, but I do think you look back and I sort of look at 07, 08 as a bit of a golden era for club rowing, which
I think I guess like what you mentioned, like that Thames Cup year, you've got Banksy saying that they're not doing a double, and we were all pulled from trialling very early because there was discussions on whether that would make a difference. And the aim for the year was very much the 8, whereas the next few years when I was in the plate 8, you're doing your thing. It was more focused towards trials and stuff. I guess it's post 2008, right? So you're looking at those 2 years are more likely to get people into the British squad. So it's like you're spending your time singles, pairs, all trialing, this, that.
You're falling between two stools, and that's where Brookes, they go, right, we're about the big boats in the 8s, and unless you're real, I had that at Molesey. I remember, I think in 2012, I said, right, we're going to go for the Thames Cup, and I stopped people, a couple of guys trial, but that was the focus. And because otherwise, if you don't spend enough time developing that boat, someone who's lived in it is going to beat you.
Yeah, I mean, I lost the plate by 6 foot, 3 foot, and 1 foot in the 3 finals, and my Thames one we won by 6 foot. So I've had 4 finals with like a 17-foot margin.
Never had any more mine close, apart from as a coach. It's amazing.
In 2 of those 8 races, we pretty much weren't in the crew until we went on training camp.
Yeah.
And you look back and think, I'm racing. 1 year we lost to Harvard, 1 year we lost to Cal.
Yeah.
These guys were in their 8 from head of the Charles.
Absolutely.
And we're getting in our 8 in June.
That was the strength I had at Thames. Just, right, you're not going to trials. Why, don't be so silly. There's a couple of guys that wanted to go.
Yeah.
No, we're about the bit, and that, so I didn't have that problem. That was it. 1 goal, get on with it.
It's a difficult dynamic because I also wanted to go to the team. So I also wanted to row in pairs. But like you said, when you're stuck between the 2, I think you can get a bit lost. I think your point, you want to make that decision earlier. Get to first trials, right? Look, how we do. Is this going to happen?
After the head, certainly, you need to decide, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you spend the summer in it.
Yeah, you need a whole.
Well, those American crews, I remember in 12, so you lost the final, I had the Molesey Brookes composite, I think, in the semi. And I was in the launch with Richard and Henry, and Richard said, what's going to happen here? And I said, we're either going to win by 2 feet or we're going to get stuffed. And he said, we're going to get stuffed, aren't we? I said, yeah, I think we probably are. And I remember looking at the launch, and he said, look at that blade work. And Harvard, it was horrible conditions, but they've been running together for like 3 or 4 years. And we've been running together for 3 or 4 weeks. And it does make a big difference. Yeah, which is partly why schoolboys will beat a lot of senior crews, because they spent 3-4 years, sometimes 5 years rowing together. There's gonna be a trait, yes, there won't be as strong, but they're going to be far more home, especially off the start. And
awesome. All right, so then talk into some comparison of some of the other roles you've had as a coach. you got Williamson and Leander. The next one you went to Molesey. How long were you at Molesey for?
4 years.
4 years, yeah.
Longest coach by everyone beginning. They've been motoring through coaches every 2 years. I was at Williams, we won the Head of the Charles, and we were baiting out of Northeastern where Hodgie was.
Mm-hmm.
I knew him a bit. I used to race against him, and we got chatting. And then about a year later, he rang me up. Would you apply? And I applied and ended up getting the job. Funny place.
So first head coach, or were you head coach at Williams?
I was head coach at Williams.
Yeah,
where I put an awful lot. I have to say that was the last time I was nervous before a race. Was at Williams. I have not been nervous before a race because then I had my son the following year. And once you've had kids, it's just sport, but it's a game changer. And we won the Head of the Charles, and it was a bit like taking over Thames. Actually, it was the same guys, but they've been underperforming for years.
Uh-huh.
And I changed the whole thing, changed the culture. A lot of the stuff I learned from the SAS when I was at Leander, put into practice, and we won the Charles, and then I just flogged them through the winter. And I think we lost one race to Trinity, been unbeaten for 4 years, which is where Henry Palmer had come from. They'd won the Temple, but they'd lost all of those guys that won the Temple. I remember thinking, okay, this is our chance. And the pre-race chat at Williams, so the equivalent of the Eastern Sprints, but for Division 3. So you probably got a medal standard, 540, I think I set it at. Okay. So decent standard.
Yeah.
Back then, I mean, not, now things have moved on, but I could barely speak before the pre-race chat.
Yeah.
I remember just saying, if anyone is in front of you, they're going to pay for it. That was it. That's all I could get out. I was so emotional, and then they came clean through.
I remember
that was a huge win for me, actually. That was up there with winning Henley. There's no throws about it. That was
one of the most nerve-wracking pre-race speeches I've ever had was with you at under-23s in the Cox 4.
Oh, God, yes.
Because we had...
about you with Pat, Ertan.
I was thinking...
completely forgotten about it. I totally forgotten about the under-23s.
Yeah.
Pat was at Stroke, Andy Holmes.
Andy Holmes.
It was good for that.
Yeah, that went. You're talking about boats that just clicked.
Totally forgotten we'd done that.
Yeah, that boat absolutely went. It was quite funny for me because I had Henry the year before and then had you, and I was like, oh, Ben's like a slightly refined Henry. Like, Henry's just like, let's fucking go. And Ben's like, let's fucking go, but let's do it like this.
He coached the 8, didn't he? That was a really good, I completely forgotten about that. I found the medal the other day, actually. So now starting giving
coach. We had a decent, we basically knew we were sort of on for a medal, and I remember we sat in the final, we started talking about like what we need to do to win gold, and I
put a lot of thought into that. I remember thinking, I stayed awake late thinking about that one, and I had to take Pat aside and say, I had a little chat with Pat. I said, you've got to go early on this. You've got to put yourself in. You can't leave, because Pat's brilliant sprint finisher and all the rest of it. Yeah. But I said, you're going to have to take this on, or you're going to get dropped. It's about all I remember, other than Belarus was a really weird, interesting place to be, and the food was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, the whole time.
That was a lot of fun. And then we went out for drinks, didn't we, on a Saturday night, and we shouldn't have done.
No, because we flew back.
No, we were spare. Well, whenever it was, but you were the guys with the spares for the next day.
Oh, okay, yeah. So our final was on Saturday, and then we got named. I didn't go mental, and what we've been told is that me and whoever else was going to be the spare for the 8 had to be me and Pat had to be downstairs at breakfast and make sure if we were needed. So we woke up the next morning, I came down for breakfast, everyone was fine, cool, all right. Then we went backstairs, and then we got like the late bus back. So a couple hours later, we got down to the course. And as the bus rolls up, Chris Collins standing there, like looking angry. And we get off, and he's like, "Why the fuck were you not here 2 hours ago?" And we were like, Pete told us to come to breakfast and check, but not to come to and there'd been some mismanagement, and he was like pissed. Thankfully, he's like, oh, okay.
It was a good trip, that, and then a very big night out in Warsaw.
Yeah, and the last night, that one.
Very big night out in a strip club in Warsaw with Stan Ludis sliding down the... Yes, anyway. I completely forgot about that. Yeah,
good race.
I mean, it was good fun, but it doesn't I don't know, I don't feature it that highly in terms of...
Well, I remember you saying you were like, it's something you like to tick off your box, but always like fell in an awkward place. But you'd asked and turned it down like 4 times. You're like, I can't do this.
I've been asked a couple of years, I think, in a row.
Yeah.
And then kids, it was just very difficult after Henley and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah, that was a good fall. That was a good trip.
Yeah, no.
Very good team, actually. If you look at a lot of those sort of people in that went on to do some pretty good stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Stan, Sachi, Scott Durant out of the 8. There was some A lot of Olympic medals. I think every boat got a medal almost. Almost every boat got a medal.
I started doing well. Yeah, that was when Under 23 started picking up those years. And the women's doing really well as well. When they women 8 started getting silvers and golds and stuff.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool. Cool. So to go back, I'm interested, like you say, when you were at Molesey, you sort of put into place some of the stuff you did with the SAS.
Well, that was at Williams, but that's never that still lives with me now. I mean, the visitors went at Thames. I emailed the guy that took us up there, Floyd, who you met.
Yeah.
He was I was a game changer. Absolutely changed my career, I would say. But he always talked about the 1%, and he was trying to find that slight edge. And then you hear Olympic champions talking about it. Okay, fine, because we know loads and we don't think much of it. When you hear a guy whose end result is actually going to be death, rather than the difference in a gold or silver or the bronze and nothing, it carries a little bit more weight. And I think he was at Hereford Rowing Club, and Ted, who you remember, was at Hereford, and he saw this big bloke on the ergo, doing a bit of this, but looking at buddy, I got chatting and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm soldier down the road." Put 2 and 2 together. "What do you do?" "I'm treasurer at Leander, with the best sporting club in the world at the Olympics," or whatever. I can imagine the spiel. And Floyd came down in December that year. We had supper with Banksy, Partridge, Debbie, Jane, myself. I remember I went home and wrote like 3 pages of notes, which I since lost. And then he came down in the January. He came down in December. I took him out rowing, and we stuck him in the middle of an 8. So that year we won the visitors in the Thames Cup, and it was basically that group plus a few others. And he didn't catch a crowd, didn't cock anything up. And we asked him afterwards, "What were you doing?" He said, "Well, I could only control my head and my handle." Okay, there you go, guys. Take note. That's pretty solid advice.
Control the controllable.
Control the controllable. And it's basically everything he said. You'd have heard in all sorts of sporting, TED Talks or whatever. But there was just that another level every time. And again, because he was the major officer commander in the counter-terrorism wing at Hereford, carries some pretty serious weight. And then we went up there, and there was a big hoo-ha about who would go. And I remember thinking, bloody Colleton had better not go as the coach. I was going to be really peed off. And Banksy, right, you're going up, you're the youngest, you're the fittest. And so we had a sort of coaches meeting, who was going to go, and we chose it on whose potential was going to add the most weight to. And it was Simon Jones, who was in the lightweight quad that year, Charlie Brereton, won Thames Cup, Tom Bailey. Do you remember Tom Bailey?
Yeah. For guy from Hereford,
Wilco, and Joe Cook. And we drove up, me and Jonesy and Joe in one car, the others in the other car, and we got there and got sort of checked in, phones all scattered, all the rest of it. It was pretty eye-opening. Floyd met us, right, into the gym. And all the guys and girls like, he said, "Well, we weren't going to do anything tough on the first night." "Shut up. We're his now. That's it. Get in there." So what are you worried about? I haven't done any training for 2.5 years. We go in the gym, and he said, I won't go through the entire story. I'll just, the few highlights that really stick out. He said, "Right, I'm going to give you the 2 hardest tests I know in the gym." And I was thinking, bloody hell. But he already told the whole mind game was don't think. Don't let yourself get drawn into the negative thoughts. So I remember sitting there thinking, whatever he's going to give you, it's not going to kill you. And I just sat there, mind just totally turned off, just put it in neutral. And when you have 3 kids and you're watching, but like you learn, it's actually a very useful skill rather than overthinking what might be coming at you, and you've no idea. So just don't entertain it. Anyway, we did the beat test, which is a piece of piss. And then this 5-minute squat jump, a minute of squat jumps, burpees, sit-ups, squat thrusts, and something else. And we did all of it, and we finished, and we'd all done pretty well. We'd all scored pretty highly. And Floyd said, "How was that?" And Jonesy said, "I'll be honest, Floyd, it wasn't a patch on a badly paged ergo test." And his face, he literally, it just fell. And we went back to his house. He gave us some beers. We did the Myers-Briggs tests. And I said, "See what you're doing here?" "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're giving us some beers, so we're honest." And he said, "Yeah, quite right. We get on with it." And the next day, we went out on the hills with the directing staff, did an 8-mile combat fitness test with the guys that were about to run the January selection. So they're all seasoned SS operatives. And they gave us this chat beforehand. People would be dropping out, really early on, and me and Jonesy are looking at each other like, bloody hell, what the hell are we getting ourselves in for here? Anyway, we get there, and it's a fairly chilly morning, and he said, "Right, civvies, you got too much kit on. You'll get too hot. Take it off." because obviously we sort of forgot we didn't know if we were going to stop or what. And you start an outing with a load of kit on and you take it off as you go. Okay, fine. So we took some kit off. We had some weight, not loads. They didn't have loads, but we had a bit of weight. And off we went. Charge off down this hill, and they'd jog down, or run downhill, jog along the flat, and they'd what's called tab uphill. So just walk really fast. And Wilco, I remember at one point, about a mile in, I was chatting to I think he was obviously an officer. He looked like a bloody maths teacher from your primary school. Big bloke, but some of them were the hardest, toughest looking people you've ever seen. And some of them just looked nothing. And I said to him, would people be dropping out by now? And he said, oh yeah, they'd have gone 10, 15 minutes ago. And I was like, really? Why? And he said, pressure. Just, you haven't got your second wind, you haven't settled into it. Oh, I can't do it. And I remember Wilco cantering past me wearing his bloody hush puppy shoes. I've never forgotten. And this, all I said to Charlie Brereton, just look at this. This is awesome. All these rucksacks going up and down with big, summer's out, but big grey cloud. It was really cool. Halfway around, I thought, what am I learning here? It's like rowing. You don't need to be superhuman. You just got to be really prepared and really want to do it when the shit hits the fan. Last mile or so, I remember there was me, the five lads, 5 guys of us, 2 or 3 of their directing staff out of 30. I look back, next person I could see was Joe Cook. I couldn't see the rest of the directing staff. Okay, we've done all right here. We finished, and I said rather glibly, how do we get on? And he said, yeah, you guys you're pretty fit for civvies. Difference was, we then got in our cars, dry kit, sandwiches, milkshake, water. They stood around in wife beaters smoking.
Yeah.
And me and James were like, okay, that's pretty cool. We then went home and slept. I won't talk about what we got up to in the armoury where Wilco decided to show off in front of the night vision goggles. It was awesome. It was, and then I actually spoke to Floyd the other week, and he came down the following year. I had him down at Thames. He now runs this awesome thing called Compass for Life, which is, I mean, just when you look into it, it makes so much sense. And it's sports psychology in a nutshell. But I've got another friend actually I was going to join the reserves in 2009. Me and a few other rowers actually, it all transpired by my Sunhaven interview. But I had a friend of mine, he rowed at Leander in the late 90s. I won't say his name on air. But I had him down to Thames, and he put on the Al Pacino Inches speech.
Oh yeah.
And I said, guys, I've been telling you for years, watch this. This is sports psychology in 4.5 minutes. I mean, I love it. It's just awesome. And he put it on.
Yeah, we found that at school. I remember I played it in a house assembly, and I had to because we had the younger kids, cut the swear words out on the volume bar and stuff.
It's all there. That is, I can't make you do it. And it is, and obviously Al Pacino is brilliant. But he put it on, and then afterwards, I can't actually remember anything he said. We went and had a quick pint afterwards, and he said, all our training, all the money we get, all the training we do comes down to doing that under pressure. Well, that's sport, isn't it? It's doing the basics under pressure.
Yeah,
that's the whole. Essentially, the difference between winning and losing is doing the basics well under extreme pressure.
Yeah,
it was absolutely fascinating.
I find all that stuff fascinating. I find it's almost a bit frustrating as you get older, and you're like, oh no, they were right. It's just the simple. It's the simple things. It's the basics.
Brian had you guys doing Hands, Body, Side, all those pauses, all endless pauses, all winter.
And the more people we speak to, it's funny, the more people, John Collins was a big one, where he was just like, I just kept turning up. And then one day, there was no one else left in front of me. And it's like, it can't be that simple.
You're like doing the basics and dealing with the pressure. And that was the other thing I really learned, was sort of the mind game of taking pressure off athletes, actually. And Henley, the boat tents and all the rest of it is a very unique environment. A lot of people freak out and all the rest of it. And I think we developed the traffic light system, which Floyd gave us. The Kiwis talk about the All Blacks talk about the red zone and the blue zone. But no, I mean, that's it. The rowing's the easy bit. It's all the stuff around it. And that trip to Hereford, thanks to being at Leander, was there's no. I don't think it's any coincidence that if you've seen the SAS Rogue Heroes or any of your viewers, Paddy Mayne, world class rugby player, Jock Lewis, president of Oxford University Boat Club in 1937, turned around a 13-year losing streak.
Yeah,
and I gave a talk at Leander about 18 months ago on Jock, because he's on the board. He didn't survive the war, and Floyd opened it, and this Leander member who was in it, he finished it, and he was the officer that unveiled the statue of Jock Lewis at Hereford.
Awesome.
And they're two of the hardest sports on the planet, and to me, there's absolutely no coincidence.
Of course, the mindset has to be there has to be some crossovers. And I think that's the interesting thing we thought about bringing this podcast in, because obviously rowing's a small world and it's great to talk to rowers, and well, there's a limited amount of people who are going to find that interesting. But what crosses over? Like in terms of what do you take from your rowing into coaching? What have I taken from rowing into my business? How do other people have used those tools to be successful? Because I think they are some things that are difficult to learn. There are some things that you can only learn in difficult circumstances, and high level sport will give you the difficult circumstances and force you to learn to see things about yourself. So, I think in the future we're going to branch out a little bit and get into that, and I think that's really interesting. And
well, there's a lot of rowers who've done very well in the military. I won't go through the list now, but it's quite an extensive list of people.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
No.
Yeah.
It's, if you actually wow, and a lot of your viewers are know a lot of those people first or second hand. There's an awful lot of lessons that you can learn.
The other thing from coaching, like I sort of feel quite selfish as an athlete. I never took into account the fact that my coach would be nervous. I never even thought about it. I was so busy dealing with my own nerves. And then when you become a coach, all of a sudden you're like, I almost probably at times felt under more pressure, because when I rowed, I was nervous for myself. And then when I coach, I'm nervous for like 30 people. I want 30 people to succeed. I'm not just talking about myself. And the big crossover for me was, as an athlete, when we pushed off the dock, that would normally be the point where my nerves would calm a bit, because you straight into...
They only reappear when you're sitting on the start line waiting for...
because your whole warm-up, you've done 100 times, you're back into your... And then when I first pushed the crew off as a coach, that's when the nerves hit. Because then you're like, at this point, I can do nothing.
Yep.
I can check the boat and I can talk to you, and we can do our pre-race chat, and I can and I'll go and make sure all your gates are closed so you haven't messed them up. As soon as you push them off, it was like a total. I went back and wrote an email to my school coach, and I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. I never even considered that you would be struggling with the nerves of it. But it's a lot of pressure.
Absolutely bang on the waiting. You push them off. That's it. Right, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And then you sort of pace around or whatever it is. A friend of mine, I rode with at Brookes. He won the Y-Folds for the army in A5. He's my daughter's godfather. He's been in the army, lieutenant colonel, decorated. He emailed me from Afghanistan, me and our housemates, and he said, fighting these chaps is terrific sport. But he said it's like a rowing race. He said you're really nervous before, and then once it all kicks off, you just get into it and you don't think about it.
You're just in your process.
It's the mind games. I remember when this dinner we had with Floyd and Leander, Partridge said to Floyd, well, you're sitting on the start and you've got the, we're going to do this, we're going to win. And then the other side, you've got the negative, I was going to hurt, all the rest of it. And he said, it was your head. You decide what you're going to entertain in it. I'm like, okay. It's all in the head. That's the difference, I think, a lot of it is between winning and losing is dealing with the pressure.
I did a funny thing towards the end of I was almost, without sounding too much like I need mental health, I almost separated that voice. I knew it was part of me, but it became like a different voice. Like it was the voice that at times, sometimes the voice would be like, go on, you can pull harder, you can push harder, and it would force you on. And then at other times you get that negative voice, so you're not going to be able to do this. Like, you're not good enough. Like, you can't do this. You can't keep this pace. But again, I think the more times you just run through your process and do your job, do your race plan, ignore it.
Control what you can control.
The more you realize that this voice is just, it's your body sort of suggesting things that you don't actually have to listen to. The first time when you watch new athletes, the first time they do a 2K and they go in that third 500 and it really starts to hurt, they panic. I see a lot of new, especially if they haven't done sport before, they almost have like a panic situation, like, oh my God, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna have a heart attack, something's gonna go wrong. And then the more times you get through it, the more you realize that actually I don't need to panic here. And the only difference, I'm still working just my hardest, but the difference mentally through that third 500 is that I just have that trust in my ability and myself, and I'm able to ignore that voice. But you're not really doing anything specifically different. Like you said, it's head. It's all head.
I remember Banksy, when I did my 2K PB at Leander, he said, third 500 man who's saying focus, just keep your focus. It's the only thing I remember, the whole thing was him saying, keep your focus. Boom. I never forgotten that. Don't back off it, and because a lot of people do.
You just get scared. You scare yourself.
Keep going, push on through, and then you've always got that last 300-400 meters. You can always take it home, but a lot of people back off it, and that, which is why the third 500 is absolutely, a lot of it is won and lost.
Yeah. Cool. So then, obviously, now speaking about taking those experiences into Thames Rowing Club, who, he's just before you were there, there's sort of a 10-year drought, and not long after you turned up, the things started to turn around. So how was that, I guess, coming into that system? What else did you bring? Do you feel like you were in a different position yourself as a coach, or do you think it was about just bringing the same?
I got headhunted, I suppose. Guy Robin Bourne Taylor was who I talk about rowers that get stuff done. The two conspicuous Garage Cross medals for Leander. That was quite Owen Davies and Robin. I won't bother getting back into that.
You'd never think Owen when you rode with him.
Well, I mean, he was hard as nails, wasn't he? Amazing bloke. Him and Robin, they were 5% of all conspicuous Garage Cross medals handed out in Afghanistan from the same rowing club. Both, either ends of the technique scale. But Robin was working for a guy called Chris Swan, who was on the committee at Thames, and he said, rowing's really sorted out. Anyone who can do it. Do you know someone? Robin rode for me a little bit at Molesey. I hoodwinked him into coming to row for me at the Head, and they picked you in the second day in 2010 or 2011. Yeah. Just picked you. Josh was in it as well. And he said, give Ben a ring. And Molesey was coming to the end. I'd kind of had enough. First year, you're getting, it's a different setup. It was proper club rowing. So I'd gone from Leander, which is the easiest rowing job on the river, to be honest. Molesey was a pretty easy job. Great bit of river. Most of the athletes are there in the day. Against the spirit and all the rest of it. And Thames was quite an interesting challenge. I'd always thought it was a sleeping giant. It takes a year, get used to the whole setup and the committee and the boats and the ruddy timed way. When we lost that year, 2 semi-finals, it got better. I remember going, wow, I've really cocked something up. What's gone wrong? And come October, I realised they weren't training, and I gave them a serious talking to. And at the same time, we had this guy, Tom Jeffrey, who's about your height, but he's double the chest size. Like, the guy is a monster. And interestingly, we found that year, I think, I was looking back on some of the lads were in the office and we were chatting. I found the Sporting Giants results, because I was part of one of the coaches to do that. And we looked up who was the top female, Helen Glover, top male, Tom Jeffrey. And he'd been sent advice to come to us by Brookes. And he probably should have gone to Rio, to be honest. The guy's a fool. He walked away from the sport and then decided to come back to it. And he just trained like a complete and utter monster, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
And I did say to the guys, right, you need to do 130 to 150k a week. This is how you're going to do it. This is the program. And if you do the whole lot and you don't win, I'll buy you a first round of beers. Tom turned up and he was just an animal. And all the guys, okay. And he was what I needed.
You only need one to set the standard.
He was it. And I mean, he was I've coached, some of the best in the business, and he was as hard as anybody I've ever coached. He could put himself in a complete hole. But a lot of it was, you talk about the man management. Did you row with Padders in the play final in 11, maybe? Yeah, I mean, he's a real character, and I'd known Padders socially for quite a few years. Beat him in the Thames Cup final in 12 at Molesey. And they were nice guys, but initially I thought after 14, maybe we need some younger people. No, actually, that 15-8 were probably, I would say, about as fast as the 2007 Thames Cup crew I had, and probably as fast as the Molesey crew, with full-time jobs. They paddled so hard everywhere. And most crews these days, we talk about doing junk miles, they just don't go through the motions. Those guys, they go to work, they do 2 mornings a week on the ergo and the pairs, go to work, come down, and they were a fantastic crew. The key actually to the whole thing, it was Tom. And I think, if I'm honest, managing someone like Padders and getting him to do the training, it was the selection. We put them through the most brutal selection, which I hadn't done the previous year. I think probably I'd come out of Molesey a bit emotionally battered from Rowley's shenanigans with Jurgen and David and all the rest of it. It wasn't a place that sort of built me up. And it took me a year to find my feet. And we just hammered them on selection, pairs and then fours. And we found our group of pairs identified the 4 fastest pairs for the Head. Took a guy out, he wasn't eligible. And we went on camp, and then we get back in the pairs for a couple of days, and then we found 2 fours. And we went out, and I think it ended up being middle, I can't remember what it was. And we raced these 2 falls right at the end of camp. They were absolutely hanging. And one crew moved out. They'd been selected a bit earlier, and then we selected this fall with TJ and padders in the middle of it. And then what ended up being bow pair at either end, I think. Yes, that's right. And the boat with TJ and padders came back, and they dead heated. And we had cameras on either side of the lake. To this day, they row about who won.
Yeah.
But we can't pick it. And I just remember they were all there, like, just dead over the walls. You know, I knew we had something. Come ninth to the head, you know, and I knew we had something very, very special. Because if nothing else, you talk about being the last man in the boat. Well, these guys had earned, and they were hanging. And then after that, they went and did an 18k ergo. After I told them, you're done, you don't need to do any more, and they stuck off and did an ergo. Okay, like, we've got a very, very unique group of people here.
I look at, obviously, I don't know all the guys in that crew, but like James Padmore was the example. I rode with him at Leander. He was a solid athlete. He had good scores. He knew how to row. He was like certainly top end club athlete. You know, he got on the ladies' plate. Leander, like you knew he was good.
He was a stone lighter for me in 15.
Wow, there you go. They make a difference. But we've had other people talk on about the basically the habit of winning and how winning becomes a habit. Do you think at Thames that there was a bunch, like you said, we need younger blood? You know, actually, no, we've got it. The talent's here, but these are guys who've missed out here and there and everywhere. Was there a sense of like, right, we need to
absolutely
change?
They weren't doing any battle paddling. I changed the whole thing. After 14, we sat down, me and the coaches, who were fantastic. There were Pete Corson, Sam Glenn, Dave Marr, really good support guys, and they challenged me. Pete especially was, I let him do a lot of the detail. And the whole race plan was Pete. I remember him telling me, and I sort of wasn't really listening. I said, yeah, fine, get on with it. We flipped the whole, we just turned the whole thing on his head, and we did a lot more match racing. So they were battle hard one. It was a racing against each other. We came up with fight night, which was, you know, you just go and race each other down in Battersea, and we made them beat the crap out of each other. There's a long and short of it. So that when it came to their semi-final, which was their final, they're a length down. And to this day, I still can't believe they did what they did. Connie called the move early, and they just went straight through that crew. And I'd blacked out. I remember thinking at the barrier, that's it. I haven't done it. I remember thinking I failed to rewire their brains. So I remember thinking who I might be, and I couldn't have been further from the truth. And Pete Corson, I sort of thought I had this. We went through them like a knife through butter, and I was like, bloody hell, we're in front. I literally don't remember that bit. I was thinking, am I going to be a postman or a dustman on Monday?
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't be a dustman because it's too smelly, so I'll be a postman. That was literally like that minute. It's a minute between the barrier and the falling. And I was like, wow, we're in front. And they weren't the fastest we had on paper, but I suspect they may have been the toughest, and they probably actually were the fastest.
It's
the same group of guys. We just, apart from Tom, really led the way. We looked at the power to weight, so they were 86 kilos and pulled 607. And Padders, we've got a photo of him weighing in, and he was a stone lighter with the same ergo he had at Leander. Yeah, it's a full-time job.
We struggled with Leander in my ladies' plate cruise because the competition was never in the UK. So we'd go to Wallingford, Met Marlow, smash it, never have a close race. Normally like breeze through your Friday of the plating, and then all of a sudden you got Brown or you got Harvard, and these guys
I had the same problem at Brookes, at Brookes, and then you come up against it and you're just not. So we recreated it with force. Like I said, that race in Ghent where they dead heated in Seville. I mean, we've got it on footage somewhere. It was absolutely unbelievable.
It's super interesting listening to what she said, because last weekend again at Met we bumped into Dan Boddington, who I'd rode with at Leander, who is now at Thames.
Yes.
And we're saying, how's it going at Thames? And he said, do you remember? He was like, tell you what, people say, you know, you see Thames doing well. I know why. They train fucking hard. He was like, they turn up in September and they train fucking hard, and they train fucking hard all year, and that's how they do it.
Thames used to start training in the beginning of October. And when I turned up, I said, no, 1st of September or the first Saturday you can get. And that was it, year round, a bit of a break at Christmas. I remember saying, if you start training in January, you're going to last till 40. If you start training in November, you're going to last a lot in the enclosures. You have to start at the beginning of the year.
It's great to hear what you put in place.
I carried on. I rode against Sanders, the head coach. Now they're doing a really good job. I used my opposite man at Fiji. And I remember after a couple of my after the 2016, I was pretty knackered, actually, quite burnt out. And I think I resigned. What's it going to take to keep us? I need a really good assistant, a proper full time. And we got some CVs. Most of them went in the bin. Oh, okay, Nerouse. Rang him up. So quick introduction. So I think we rode against each other with Fizzy. Yeah, and I said, Thames Cup, what numbers would you want? And he said, 6'10", 90 kilos. And I said, not quite what I'd have, but good enough.
Yeah.
And that was it. Went over to meet him, and he's, when I was absolutely exhausted after 4 years of Molesey and 6 years of Thames, so I really needed a break. And he just carried on the culture was a huge thing. We really did, because there was a lot of, I'll be honest, there was a shed load of excuses. So many excuses. Why they didn't win this, why they didn't win that. And there was never any, we just weren't fit enough, weren't tough enough.
Yeah.
Where that came from, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It was making them accountable. That was the whole thing, was push it down to them and make them accountable. Now they've got telemetry and all the rest of it. I never had any of that. The boats were a bit of a joke. I think we won the visitors in a 7-year-old shell. They've now got money pouring in, but it's a really nice club, and it's a pretty well run club. It's interesting because they were struggling years ago, and they sat down with Leander and they said, what do we do? And they said, well, use our model, make a restaurant or bar, take the money, plough it into good coaching first, boat second. That's it. If you want to win your red box, it's kind of simple. I go down there now.
Yeah, well, like I say, taking those things from Brookes and Leander, putting them into other squads and stuff. So, yeah, no, that's really interesting.
We're trying to do on the Tideway is a difficult one, though, because you are 6 months of the year, you're trying not to kill people at night. And it's, I think that was part of it. After 6 years, it was like I had PTSD. I was, absolutely exhausted. And the Tideways now, it's really difficult to train on and row on.
One thing as a rower, like I said, I never understood the pressures that a coach was under. Then, quite similar to you, when I finished rowing at Leander, Banksy called me in and was like, "Hey, we need some help with the junior team." So, sort of first year out of rowing, I was then coaching as an assistant at Leander, which was great fun. And you think you're a coach, but you're not. You just get to do the fun bit, right? Which is the coaching. And then Morgan Bill and Wimps got me involved in an Oxford college, and I coached as an assistant there for a few years. Then got offered the head job. And head coach is just a different thing.
No.
It's a different thing. I think especially, who isn't a head coach who hasn't rowed? But when you've rowed yourself at a high level, you've taken that really seriously. I've put so much pressure on myself to make sure that you would do everything for all of those athletes. And I think, the fact that you did 10 years at a high level, even longer if you bring that is an incredible amount of pressure to deal with.
Well, it's all. I think it took Sander. He admitted to me actually a few years ago. There was a lot of stuff I'd protected him from because I'd take that off. And it's all the politics and all the rest of it. Especially in club rowing. I said rowing's the easy bit. It's all, as you say, when you start out, you've got one boat, and then you maybe have two boats, okay, and then the whole thing just kind of got through the ranks or responsibility, as it were. There's so much more that entails. A lot of it, running a club, is firefighting. And every year we had some disaster, all sorts of things, and there was always a sit down with the captain and the chairman and all the rest of it. And a lot of it is crisis management. If I'm going to be brutally honest, a lot of it is frankly crisis management. Yeah, and try to not let things snowball. Henley Rowing Club, they had a big issue there, not that, a few years ago. Geniuses. It's not different. The rowing world is small, and it's very easy for fire to spread, if you like.
Yeah.
And these things to completely escalate. And Thames I always thought Thames are very good. They might not move super fast, but they'd always make the right decision. London struggled. I think that London are going really well now, which is great, because when I was there, we didn't put a first date out ever in the Bowstead, which is their long-standing race going back to the 30s. It's the same as the boat race. It used to be in the papers. It used to be a big, big thing. When I was there, we put out a second date every year. I had the first day go off and do something else. And they nearly had to, at one point, their Masters 8 was their fastest crew. They'd lost, you've got the coach, captain, the chairman, the committee, the 4 C's, as I would call it. Yeah. And you could maybe have 2 of them drop the ball, 3 of them drop the ball, you're in trouble. And now, I don't know exactly what happened. It doesn't matter, but they've recovered it. But there's a lot of moving parts. And if you're not all on the same page and all the rest of it, then you're going to struggle.
Yeah, definitely.
And at the Thames, they were very clear that I was brought in, win Henley. That was it. That was what they wanted to do, win Henley. And so it made it a lot easier than Molesey, where if we want to win Henley, but we want guys in the team. And I was like, you can't necessarily do both.
Yeah.
So you need to pick and choose.
Yeah. And that's another thing a lot of people mentioned, but Dave mentioned clear goals, clear goals.
Floyd, North Star.
There you go.
North Star. What is it? Leander, you're there to get in the GB team or win Henley.
Yeah.
That is it. It is pretty simple.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, if you can't say it in one simple sentence, it's too complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Thames now, that's it. Win Henley. That is their aim.
It's awesome. It's an awesome club. We were down there not long ago. Actually, I was down there last week trying to fix some of their bikes. They've got 14 of they kind of so much equipment. Yeah. It's really good. And wherever you're down, it doesn't matter if I turn up anytime I'm down there to fix equipment. There's people down there rowing. A lot of unsupervised rowing. Obviously people doing hard sessions unsupervised. Just random people and just walk in the gym, give them a shout. It's that great.
Part of that's changed because of COVID, because more people are at home, whereas I used to be deadly quiet through most of the day. But because of COVID, there's more working from home, so guys will sneak down and get their training in early, which is smart. But when I went down there were no pictures on the wall in the gym. Now you've seen it, there's all these great, there was nothing there. Right, we need to change that, and just so obviously the gym is a bit more minging than Harvard, for example. I don't know if you've been over to the Charles, been to Harvard or Yale. The Harvard Boathouse is just walking out. This is history. You literally feel like you're in a museum, and it's awesome. You go to Brookes, to their boathouse down at Wallingford, and all the Henley wins. Everything is on the wall, and you get a real sense of pride.
I think that draws into the habit of winning. When you're set at the start line in a Brookes, the body of weight behind you, the knowledge of knowing what's come before you. I sort of almost say it in the boat race, everyone knows the statistics. If you're through Barnes first, you got a 95% chance of winning. All of a sudden, sometimes these things can be seen as a negative, but on the right side of them, all this stuff, because that voice is going to come and it is going to test you.
Ed Green at KGS, he said to me, he's been saying for years, because he was the junior coach at Molesey, and then I was working for him at KGS. And I think it was Tim McLaren said to him when I was at Cambridge, if you're in the winning program, you're 2 lengths ahead already, because you've got the weight of expectation, but also we can do this. I mean, St Paul's would be a great example now of a school that just turn up, and they always turn on when it matters. And Brookes is obviously one. Thames. If you're trying to rebuild a program, even if you're fast, you don't have that confidence necessarily that we can do this. So I think that I'd say you should exactly say you already got a bit of a head start. But then on the flip side, you could say, well, the pressure's not on us, and that's a part of the pressure management.
Yes, the underdog stuff can be useful, but it's like you said, how you manage it. We're talking, go back to the Thames Cup 8, that when we beat Tideway Scullers and we weren't supposed to. John Collins was sort of saying we stopped trying to win and we started trying not to lose, and then that sort of whole mentality of oh my god, don't mess up, don't mess anything up, don't get this wrong. And then there's kind of that different thing. Then as soon as something does go wrong, oh shit, this isn't where we're supposed to be.
Starts to unravel.
Yeah. Which I think is quite interesting as well. But I guess, KGS is interesting. We bumped into, John Clay is there.
Bethan.
Mr. Clay, Bethan.
Yeah, Bethan. There's
Mr. Simmons, Mr. Green.
Yeah, they got a bit of
good team.
Yeah, real good team down there now. Yeah, we fix their eggs as well. just to stick that in. It's good. It's good to see so many people out there and getting, really pushing the sport, and it's fun to be a part of. It's fun to see. It's fun to be able to kind of bump into. I mean, obviously you got us in at Thames. I think we didn't do the eggs before. I think, did you get us in at Molesey as well? Probably.
Yeah,
so Molesey was there for a while, and Phil Bourguignon, is it?
Phil and I basically swapped jobs for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it with these clubs is trying to drag them into the modern era, because a lot of it, they'll have well-meaning volunteers. They can't, tinkering around trying to fix engines. I turned up at Thames, I was like, no, get DNR in, get Tom in from, you've got to bring this equipment. Otherwise, launch is just dangerous. And the ergos are crap. And you've got to get a professional in to keep you up to speed.
Volunteers are absolutely great, but you have no control over them. You can't say, do this now. Well, no, I'm just a volunteer.
That's the hard part of club management as well. That you don't run, clubs don't run themselves. A lot of rowers don't realise this. And, without the whole British rowing, without all the marshals and umpires to give up their time, we're in big trouble. But then there's that fine. Now we've moved into the professional era. You don't want to go and tread on their toes. So I remember that was a big battle at Thames, was trying to professionalise the club without getting rid of all the well-meaning volunteers. And that was actually where my boss, about my age, he'd been a novice there. He was brilliant. And the whole committee, okay, we need to tread very carefully. This is what we're being advised by a professional coach who, they wouldn't necessarily let me loose to go and manage it, which is probably the right thing. It's really hard because if you get it wrong with your squad or you get it wrong with your well-meaning volunteer, they're off down the next club.
Yeah.
And you're back to square one.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Yeah. I think it's definitely not given enough credit to that job and that the skill set being not just being fantastic at spotting what needs doing in the boat, but being fantastic at managing.
But initially, that's partly why Brookes is so good, because it's benevolent dictatorship, because there's no committee. It is Richard, then Henry and Hugo, and that's it. Like there's no politics to worry about. They just worry about the logistics and getting the job done.
Yeah.
Whereas I know in colleges, you do have well-meaning volunteers and all the rest of it, and it is quite different. Whereas Brookes is Richard is treasurer, chairman, the whole lot, which does make life an awful lot easier.
I can't remember if I've told this story before, but Henry told us. We were down there. I was down there training in Under 23 4, and we were talking about this athlete. He'd been a bit flaky, and he'd come down for the session, and he'd gone to Henry and said, "Oh, Henry, my arm's hurting a bit. I'm not sure." Henry was like, "Listen, if you're either going to get in the boat now or just fuck off and never come back." And the kid was like, "Oh, okay." So they go out. They're doing battle paddling, like one of their standard sessions. He's in the boat with one of the other coaches, and so the other coach is like, "Have you seen do you look at two seats right arm?" Bear Hash looks at it. He's got like a blood infection, or it's like twice the size of his
bright red.
The kid's like crying, like trying to get. I'm exaggerating for the purposes, but basically he was like, "Oh shit! All right, yeah, okay, let's get him in and get him to the doctor." But it's a difficult tightrope to walk, isn't it? Because you have to push people beyond their limits, but you don't want to.
Ahead of the trials, I think he was in 2016. I remember chatting to a guy called, didn't know his name. He was a Thames member. He was British, lives over there. And he said, "You must be knackered." And I said, "I am. I don't know why." And he said, "Because you're walking a tightrope the whole time. If you get it wrong, they're all down at London." I was like, yeah, that is exactly what it is. I hadn't worked it out. Because if you get his padders off, right, come on lads, Ben's an arse, we're going to go down the road, and just takes, his best mates and they go and do a 4 or whatever it is. It's happened. I mean, I've seen whole clubs decamp from Upper Thames to Henley or vice versa. It happens. So I've always said you're a slightly glorified personal trainer. Schools can't go and row for another school. That's not going to happen. Universities can't by and large, they might go and row for a club, but by and large they're not. They're stuck there. But club is very, very different, and you're providing a service. Yeah, you're trying to push them to the absolute limit of what they can do on a daily basis, monthly basis, yearly basis to get where they want to be. But they've also got jobs and money, and if you can't, you've got to be flexible. And sort of they come in with an excuse, right? And you have to sort of weigh up: is that a valid excuse? Okay, you can miss this and all the rest of it. I had guys in 15 when we started turning around. 2 of them didn't want to come on camp. Okay, fine, but you're not going to be in the top boat, and that was it. I was not. They were both junior internationals, and I wasn't going to budge. They didn't come on camp for whatever reason, and one of the, I don't think either of them came on camp. And that, whatever reason was, that was it. I ruled them out of the top boat, and they were big, strong guys, easily had the capability to win Henley. But I said, there are people here that are hungrier, that are making a sacrifice, and it's really difficult to make those judgment calls. And I learned a lot from Banksy on selection, which was quite helpful. And actually, when I started at Thames, under my boss, who I got on really well with, he said, "I don't really care what you do, how you do it, or when you do it. I just want to be able to look down the list of selection results and know why you've selected the boat." Because he'd been a bit screwed over, he felt. So there was a big thing on selection all those years. We went slightly overboard. But you can't select on the tideway. It's absolutely ridiculous. You cannot seat race there. You can't read much into anything if you go, unless you do match days. So it's just a training tool. So every bloody month, and there's a big thing on Tideway Bulletin, Ben Lewis carting the 10 squad off to the docks again for the 15th time in 5 days or something to do selection. Because we had to try and make it fair and prove we're putting the right people in the right boats. And then obviously once you start winning, then there's trust in the system. Yeah. But that first year, turning it around, I remember coming back in September 15 and I was still absolutely exhausted. I didn't recover for about another year, to be honest, because Because you're treading that tightrope. It's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Which I come back to, the rowing's the easy bit. There's all the stuff around it.
It's interesting. I could say, like, when I was a head coach and we started doing seat racing, there's a sense of like, I don't want to get this wrong. I don't want to deny someone a spot that they've been training all year for in a crew. So we're going to do a bit more. And we had an issue one year. The first time I tried to get them to go seat racing in fours, and one of them managed to capsize early on, and then they were all cold and wet. I was like, okay, well, I'll cancel that. Then I tried I thought, because we just didn't have enough athletes really to run like 8s. So we had 1/8. I tried running with sort of 2 pairs. So like one pair did the first and the last, and the other pair did the middle 2 pieces. But the results were so close. I was like, no, we're going to have to get 2 8s and do seat racing. And they didn't want to. And the excuses started coming out and this and that and all the rest of it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be, I think I know what's going down, but like, I want to make sure that you guys are getting the best of it. But, and then you say, like, even in all that stress, like, and then you've got all these other things that are happening. I also felt quite a lot of pressure, like what you were talking about, putting the program on and saying, look, if you do my program, we're going to win. I got a sense of knowing what we would need to do in order to be successful. And I remember then when from Christmas, I sort of took the training up a little bit more into mileage and stuff. And then kind of immediately started seeing a few more injuries, and then feeling a sense of being like, that's my fault. Like I'm trying to get the most out of them. And I think this is what we need to do. But then seeing the reaction, and like none of that as an athlete, as an athlete, I got injured. I'm not blaming the coach or anything, but it's just like, there's so much pressure that you put on yourself to try and do this, and it's exhausting.
The hardest part of the job is dropping people, I think. But I started off 20 years ago coaching one boat, and properly as a professional coach in the States.
Yeah,
and then it just grows and grows. And some people don't want to go beyond coaching one boat; they just love one boat.
Yeah,
and that's all they maybe can do, all they want to do. And then you sort of end up, bloody hell, you're head coach of one of the biggest rowing clubs in the world, and you've got 50 men, 40 women, 90 athletes to be responsible for, yet you've also got to try and win Henley. And I remember saying this actually, and after about a year, after I think 2 years at Thames, whoever I sit opposite Henley in the semi or the final, they're only going to have one boat to worry about. Whereas I've got an entire club to try and worry about. And I said, I don't think you realise how that, it's like a computer running at capacity. Like, you've only got so much brain power that you can use. And frankly, winning at Henley is mentally, by and large, a full-time job, if that's what you want. Leander, if I started out, just the Thames Cup, but following year I had ladies play and the visitors 4, which wasn't particularly fair, actually, because I just got, no one wants to do, so I got dumped with them. Williams was simple, that was actually only 2 8s, which is actually the easiest, because you've got 2 8s, that's it, and that's really good fun. That's probably the best, in some ways, the best job you can have, where you just got a little squad, a squad of 2 8s. But then you start factoring all the politics, all the funding, and the endless firefighting, all the disasters, and where you've got to deal with, I said, I'm not going to say on camera some of the stuff I had to deal with at Thames, but it was pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, it goes far beyond. I thought I was a rowing coach, and now I'm being responsible for
crisis management. Honestly, is probably a lot of it. A lot of us should probably end up doing quite well in trying not to let these things escalate.
So I guess we've spoken a bit about like crisis management. Control the controllables. The stuff that you brought in from the SAS. Are there any other sort of things that you've learned along the way to help manage that better, or things that things that other people could use if they found themselves in those situations?
I mean, I've been coaching. I think what was quite interesting, I'm doing stuff with Hampton, and Colin and I have been chatting a lot lately, and doing 3 years at KGS. I think actually I'm coaching beginners has been really interesting. Like J14s, I don't know if I'd have managed it 15 years ago before I had kids. When they're extricating themselves from a bush for the 5th time in 10 minutes, and they're 14, so you can't swear at them or anything. You can't be, like, maybe back in the day coaches would have done, but you can't these days. So knowing your audience is actually quite important. The senior girls at KGS bullied me, and I bullied them. We had a great grown-up relationship. But when you're 14s, I had to really go back to how the hell do you actually row? Because if you pick someone up at Thames Cup level, you find they're not going to change what they're doing with their hands. You're by and large just tweaking 1%, 2% of that stroke. When you've got someone that doesn't even know how to lift the boat and put it on the water, you really have to, like, that was 20 years ago when I did that as a novice coach in the States, freshman coach. Actually, I've obviously got to become a better technical coach since then, but yeah, coaching J14s, I actually got to the point, I just talk through the body part and just go, right, wrist, elbow, trunk, because some of them were not very athletic, shall we say. So trying to go hands, body, slide, I would literally have to talk through the exact body part you wanted them to move with an extreme amount of patience, and we'd all come off the water and go, can we go to the pub and have a drink, because that was really stressful.
You have to teach, you have to learn patience.
And I think actually, yeah, it was really good for me as a coach, because then you sort of get your teaching sweet, and then, so there's no point in teaching a 25-year-old how to feather, because if you can't do it properly, well, he's never going to change. And if you're not taught, I was taught at school, we were told you're not allowed to race until we think you row properly. And I think there's way too much trying to run before you can even crawl in our sport these days. People are just trying to get them out there, and that's it. You see these kids floundering down or rowing all late when they can't even row. And it really winds me up. Like, just row by 4s and 6s for the whole winter until it's bedded in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and I think that's something that's really, colleges, and it's a tricky one with colleges, because 7 weeks on, 7 weeks off, or whatever it is, and they actually only get 21 weeks of rowing, which is not even half a year. And often the coaches they've got maybe have only done a year of rowing themselves, and they've got stuff they'll say that might be really good, but probably not relevant in the slightest to what's being put in front of them. Which then brings you back to, you got to do the basics well.
Yeah.
But also you got to get them out racing, and you want to have fun, and it's really tricky. And I'm actually giving a talk at the Oxford Colleges next week. I did one, I think, last year. Rachel Quarrel's come in. And actually the whole thing is just do the basics well. And especially if you have someone that might go on to do quite well in the sport, don't give them a bad start by rowing badly. Which brings me back to where I started. I said with my rowing, my coaching rowing career was at Teddy's. One of the reasons they were so good, my first year, we didn't do any head races, because they weren't, until he was happy with how he rowed, you weren't racing, and then we won everything.
Yeah, definitely. Again, as a coach when we coach novices, that's another sort of weight of, like, if I can get them to do this right, if I can get them to learn how to row without putting those horrible
really
habits.
Satisfying, because you've had a blank sheet of paper and you go, I made that.
Yeah.
I had that in the state. I've created that rather than I've tweaked that and made him a little bit less crap, or I made him a bit better.
It's a different job. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
and I think it's good for every coach to go to that level of rowing. So I think having the patience and knowing your audience is a big one as well. You might, Steve, you're a big, you might be a big character as a coach. So if you let Henry loose, maybe with some nervous club rows or something, it could be a complete disaster. But obviously at Brookes is expected, it's a part of the culture and all the rest of it. So knowing your audience and knowing buttons you can push and how, but not running any business, it's the same thing.
Goes back to like man management. It's something for me. It's quite funny. I learned when I first moved to Henley. I was rowing at Leander. I got a job at the Henley Cinema.
Yeah, I remember.
And for some reason,
Webby was.
Yeah. We both worked there for 3 years. I was made manager after about 3 weeks, and Webby was never promoted. He always goes on about that. But I remember, I was manager, so I was kind of in charge quite often on night shifts, and getting people to do what you needed to do, you kind of had to find different ways to motivate them. So I had one kid who absolutely hated the job. So I couldn't be like, if you don't do this, you'll get in trouble. He'd be like, give me a reason to leave. So for him, I have to be like, oh, come on, mate, for me, will you do it for me so I don't get in trouble? Then I had one kid who was trying to save up for gap year. So he just wanted all the shifts he could get. So I was like, if you do well today, I'll give you some more shifts. And I look back at that job and remember how I kind of,
it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
19, straight out of school.
Yeah, I guess. But then it's just, I guess you sink or swim, don't you? I guess you figure it out and it went quite well, or you don't and you get fired. I guess I just managed to figure it out. And that's definitely something I've sort of taken into it, that everyone's different. Like you said, you can get the most out of people by treating them in different ways, which has been interesting. Another thing, we had a Q&A the other day. Someone said, how do I start becoming a coach? And I think the one thing we said is what you said. I don't think there's a rowing club in the world that doesn't need an extra volunteer coach. So the best thing to do, like you said, is just get involved, start at the bottom.
Set a launch with someone.
Yeah, well, definitely first, yeah.
Have a ride on a launch.
Yeah.
Make sure you know the river and the safety and all the rest of it. Because that actually is funny, you sort of people, just in the tide, but you're from Brookes, why are you talking about safety? Because I don't want any of you to die. I only had one major incident on the tideway the whole time I was there, which I was in charge of, which I had flashbacks to a long time on when they IC rode into the bloody Albert Bridge. But actually, that is the number one thing. Like, you don't need to sit there and spend hours writing a ruddy risk assessment. You look out the window, look at the river, look at the weather. No, they're not going out.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? And that actually is really important. And too many people sort of desperate to get out on the water, and actually just having that patience and no, it's right, we'll go and do something else. And then knowing your limits to some degree.
Definitely knowing your limits. It's a frustrating thing, again, in the college system. There are a lot of rules and a lot of people hate them and complain about them. There's a lot of safety rules. I mean, there's a lot of novice rowers on the water at the same time, so I understand them. The other thing that I think sometimes is that if you don't think you need safety rules, it probably means the rules are working quite well, because it probably means that you've never seen a boat hit the black buoy and break into 3 pieces and put 9 people in the water. Like, safety's got to the point where a lot of people rowing now don't have a memory of a bad incident, and then for like everyone else is thinking, we don't need to do this. And then again, as a head coach, you need to be the bad guy and be like, no, we're going to do this, and you're going to wear a life jacket, and we're going to have lights, and that kind of stuff.
I think most of us, you do it long enough, and I mean, I've only had 1 or 2. I won at Brookes very early on in my career. Richard let me loose with the entire squad, where I've been in America with 1 boat, and he had the confidence in me. But I remember I had an 8 hit one of our scullers. And again, that was a sort of, oh my God, this is a career-ending moment. Absolutely crap myself. I've never forgotten it. Then there was obviously the big incident in the States, but the States, the head of the river. I do remember in the States at Williams, there was it was our national championships. This was when I went back as the head coach in 2009, and we were regional champions. And right, this is it. We're going to win the nationals for the first time ever. And it was howling turbulent, like proper world. That's just how you break world records, in 8s. It was going to be a bit unpleasant, but it wasn't, in my opinion, dangerous. And I went up to the guy in charge, head guy, and I said, look, back home in England, we'd send crews out to race in it. If someone sank, we'd probably send 1 more race. If they sank, okay, fine, call it a day. Son, I've had 3 people die on me. We're not going out. And I thought, 3 people, you've made some shocking decisions in your time then, haven't you? But it's that responsibility, isn't it? And sort of fight, at the end of the day, if the buck stops with you, you're the head coach and all the rest of it, you're going to be a bit more cautious on your decisions. And certainly when you're younger, you might be a bit more, come on, let's get out there. And a lot of it, unfortunately, can only come with bitter experience sometimes.
Yeah. Hence the reason, the need to have some people with a bit more experience in those positions, I think.
But even from just the position of an assistant, like when I was coaching with Tom, it wasn't until sometimes like on certain days I was just in charge on my own, and then just understanding that everything that happens around like the yard, like with the boats and going out, like the pressure falls onto me. So like you naturally accept that level of responsibility and like extra cautiousness, I guess. So it can be daunting, but also it can feel pretty nice sometimes.
The problem is, I mean, Thames they had a really bad incident years ago, of the Dove Pier incident, where a load of novices nearly died. And so they put all this stuff in place, but it became, they were institutionally paranoid, I would say. Now, I've been to some other club, they're completely cavalier about it. The rules, because some rowers are like, they're very, very bright, and they will overdo everything, and you should have pages and pages, none of it goes in. So there's a sort of fine line between just practical common sense and keeping it simple, and pages of risk assessments where it just, I don't soak up information like that. I just don't. I'll, map, fine, okay, that's it. Don't go out. But it got to the point where it was so over-egged, it actually became dangerous because the rules were so complicated, no one knew what the hell to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I was going to say earlier, but it's again talking about doing the basics and keeping it simple. And I said when we started this podcast, I was one of the things I hoped that we would get would be lessons being repeated from similar people. But I thought it would take a lot longer than 14 episodes to keep hearing the same things again and again. Yeah, and just to keep hearing, keeping it simple, having that goal in like a simple goal in place, the keep turning up, obviously applying yourself. You don't get to literally just turn up and apply yourself while you're there. But some of these like similar things would just repeat really, really quick, like a lot.
Definitely. And it's also like nice to hear someone with obviously like a wealth of experience like yourself say similar things that I would say to my athletes last year. Like one of the things, maybe not in the exact same words, but you say you need to do the basics really well. what I would say is we want to practice things until we cannot get them wrong anymore. We want them so ingrained in the muscle memory that it will be really hard to get it wrong. Like if you go out rowing now, you probably have done so many sessions in the boat. How hard is it for you to mess up a catch? Intentionally, you'd have to think about, okay, I need to like mess this up, because like, you know, the correct movement is just so ingrained in everything that you're doing. That means you've just got the basics straight in your blood. So,
but that's where
it's a similar lesson.
Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
So unless you're ingraining the right stuff from the word go, that's why trying to undo a rower who's been rowing for 10 years, change stuff is really difficult.
Yeah. I think that came from, it was Mike Sprack then with the Canadian in 2008, who said we're not trained, you know, we're not trained to be good enough to win on our best day. We're trained to be good enough on our worst day.
That's what Redders and Pinson was.
Okay, so you'd probably come even from further back. And then the other one in the story you gave me was the Larry Bird.
Yeah. In the McDonald's advert?
Yeah, it was. He's a basketball player. Back in the day, they were doing a McDonald's advert, and he was to say some stuff to camera, then turn around and like just miss the shot. And it took him a really long time to do it because he spent so long making sure that he could do it.
Johnny Wilkinson.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, I mean, that guy had been practicing since he was 10. And there's the brilliant, I think it's Building Jerusalem, really good documentary.
Yeah,
and he said that was the only drop goal I ever did I didn't think about.
Sometimes.
It just happened. And he said, and now whether that's rose-tinted spectacles, I don't know, but I mean, he seems like a very genuine guy. You know, that guy practiced and practiced. I mean, he's, you know, obsessively so.
Yeah.
So under extreme pressure, I mean, talk about extreme pressure, you've got a minute to go and you are dead level and you are the favourites and it's up to you, chum. And he managed to do it. And the whole thing was so ingrained, he did it off his wrong foot as well.
Did he?
I think it was off. I think it was left foot, wasn't it?
Right, that's ridiculous.
But I mean, either way, because you need to be. My son is he's a regular rugby player now, and he's been drop kicked a rugby ball for a basketball hoop when he was 8. And I said, "All right, do it again. Prove it wasn't a fluke." He did it. But doing about 5 goes, gave him his T-shirt. Try rowing. Says they said it'd be fun. He's a good little sportsman, but he's not obsessive enough to be the next Marcus Smith or Johnny Wilkinson. Right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
He's a talented kid, but there's that whole other level of it comes back to the SAS guys. You know, is doing this under extreme pressure.
I just find the funny one. Snooker, watch a bit of snooker. It doesn't matter if you do it or don't, but obviously it's a 2-horse race. So there's a point in every match where you pop one more ball, and then no matter how much the other guy does, he'll never be able to reach the same score. And as you get later in the competition, because they always know where they are and they're keeping track, the amount of times that they'll have hit everything, and then miss that one, because that's that point at which
golf is not dissimilar.
This is the winning shot. You know, golf, pretty much anyone, I guess, like football penalties, things like that. How something that you would do a practice at home a million times over with your eyes closed, but then when the pressure comes on, that's the difference.
I mean, our visitors final is 16. And some people, I had a discussion with a certain gentleman who was in the Oxford Brookes for in the semis. Mr. Partridge, very good friend of mine. He said, "Oh, you were lucky." And I said, "Okay. Why?" And he explained why. And I said, "All right. Do you know the whole backstory?" And, you know, our guys had jobs, and I said, we made our own luck for that, because I sat in the pub with Scott on the Tuesday, so I think we're going to be in the final together. And this is why. But if they'd been in the boat for 6 weeks, they would have probably won. But we're talking about North Star. That was those guys, North Star, their goal for 4 months, and they're trained specifically for that. So when at the bottom of the enclosure and everyone's hanging out of their backside, can't start looking ragged, our guys were still doing it. And Mark says it, they're staying in their boat, they're doing their thing, and we were still rowing. Our last stroke was as untidy as our first stroke, but it hadn't unravelled. And we don't know what happened to them. You know, it was not the nicest way to win, but the plan was keep them under so much pressure they make a mistake. It's exactly what happened. And you could have gone to Dorney with probably the 4 best crews in that event, had 4 races and had a different winner every single time. Every single time. But we covered every base. And I did say to the guys, I don't think you're the fastest crew in the event, but you're the most complete crew in the event. And that's what it took to win.
It just comes down to getting it right on the day. Yeah.
Well, we were the underdogs as well. Like that helped as well. Yes, 3 of them had won Henley the year before, so they knew how to win. And the freshest guy, and they crossed the line as, you know, Cal completely destroyed. Our 3 other guys in my boat. The freshest guy was our steersman. And it's all very well, I'm going to go for it. But if you're steering the boat and you lose, you know, you can't think straight, you're no good to anybody. They're like, you know, you're the captain of the ship, and you've got to keep the clearest head out of everybody even if it means you've only rode yourself to 95% standstill,
Yeah,
not 100% standstill.
Yeah.
As Richard Sproutley always said to us, get a score on the board.
Yeah.
No tales of woe was his big saying of Brookes. No tales of woe. Oh, I hit a bush or whatever. Simple advice. Like, don't make a mistake.
I also think that's where, you're talking about training harder, where that almost has a double benefit, because obviously if you train harder, you're going to be fitter, but also like that weight of that training just builds up. And I think it's something I probably read in Redgrave or Pinson, whatever, when they were talking about money in the bank. Like every session is like £1 in the bank, £1 in the bank. And when it comes to race day, you've got more money to spend. Yeah. And having that, not, you know, like another one I think it was Cracknell that picked it, that I heard say first, was he always trained on Christmas Day because he knew no one else was, right?
Wasn't that Daley Thompson?
Was it?
Daley Thompson.
Okay,
he would train on Christmas Day because he knew no one. I did that when I was at school.
As a 14-year-old kid, that just like lit me up. Yeah. And 1 year at Christmas, we have Christmas at my grand's house, and I was like, Dad, we need to take the ergo. And he was like, we haven't got room. So I went down into his shed, found his roof bars, put the roof bars on the car, took the ergo up. First time I ever took an ergo apart, took the legs off it and everything, and strapped it to the roof. And I was like, I'm erging on Christmas Day. And like that gives you the confidence come race day. Yeah.
You sit there, yeah, have I done everything I can? Yes. If you lose, you lose. But if you say, oh, I wish I trained a bit harder, blah, blah, then that's annoying. You didn't deserve to win. But to me, sport boils down to testing yourself under extreme pressure. Did you do everything you could, and win, lose or draw, shake their hands and go and have a pint?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just leaving no stone unturned.
That's why I haven't really continued rowing after I finished professionally, because I never want to lose a race.
If you're not going to do it properly, no point doing it.
Yeah. I never want to lose a race and be like, I know I didn't train hard enough.
I mean, I think you should get someone like Ben Hunt Davis on. You know, he runs that brilliant company, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? Because I know I've rode with Rowley at uni and then coached him at Molesey. And we were there before the Head of the River in 2012. I think you guys came second, the Czechs won it, and we came third, Brookes were fourth. We were out there on Barnes Bridge chucking oranges off it on the Wednesday, sort of where is the line exactly? And he had that whole mentality. We looked under every single bloody stone to find that little bit extra. Yeah. Which then comes back to the SAS guy. You know, you're not trying to do one thing 100% better. You're trying to do 100 things 1% better.
Yeah.
Which I heard from Zach Purchase years ago. I remember thinking, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You're not going to just revolutionise your physique, your physiology overnight. So what can you do? I'll do a bit more stretching, or sit in front of the TV and just get a bit more flexible, or reduce my injury, or eat a bit better. Or it all adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is where sports now getting to the Olympics, which is why rowing's in a really interesting place, because, well, what next? People can't train any harder, I don't think.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe they're training a bit less and a bit smarter. I don't know. You've got the telemetry, the boats you now got, well, you got these wings, they can't get any better. Like, the sport's got to a very, very interesting point.
Yeah.
It's almost sort of maxed out the arms race.
Yeah. Only until we jump onto the next level, I think. So that was one of the questions we had asked on our very first episode when we reviewed the boat race, which is, what would you do better? And that's exactly what we said. You can't train any harder. You can't train anymore. You've maxed out the volume. What do you do then? You need to basically look for every single advantage possible, those 1% with technology. And I personally think rowing stuck a little bit back in 2005 with the level of technology currently available to us. So we've got something in the works, and obviously we want to make sure that rowing is brought properly into the 21st century with the technology that's going to be available to athletes, similar to what you see in like other sports like football and other statistics. And obviously with more tech like that too, it'll be more attractive to any investors and other people who can create a spectacle out of it for other people to watch, because obviously right now it's really hard to go and follow a 2K race. But if you've got technology from the boats and from the athletes, and you can kind of put that out in a presentable way too, that's going to attract more money into the sport, and then the facilities will improve, and then that's going to be the next jump up.
The cycling were quite a long way ahead of us, and I think we're catching up. I mean, rugby, because I think England rugby in about 2000 were the first ones to put the GPS on the back, and they were going out and they were trying to increase their visual awareness. And I think Clive Woodley, he's actually a hero of mine, properly stood back, looked at everything. Right, what can we do better? And it all came down to, okay, Johnny getting that one drop kick, but actually there was obviously a lot more to it. That put them in a position to do that. But he really, let's think outside the box. So I kind of feel like I'm not sure what's going to come next, but this is great. Row 360 is a fantastic thing, trying to bring new ideas.
Yeah. It's a similar thing for this, like wanting to if we've all learnt the hard way, do we want all the next generations to have to learn the hard way again, or can we fast forward some of the things that we all had to learn so that then they are focusing on the next things to come?
That's a really good point. The other day I was down the launch with a guy at Hampton, a good coach, with their second date, which Josh Butler will inherit next year as their first date. They're going to be
Josh
quite good. Yeah, Josh is good. Josh loves his technology.
Yeah.
And he was chatting to me about swivel speed. I got no idea what you're talking about, mate. I haven't got a clue. And he's a maths teacher, so he loves all that side of it. And I said, okay, I'm sure he's right. There's probably something in this, but I would sort of, sometimes you've got to be careful because you could rely almost too much on the technology. I remember David Tanner telling me at a meeting, we had all the high performance coaches had a meeting at, not Caversham, Sonning Hotel every year. And I remember saying, look, I'd like some money for telemetry because I could see the use it had. I never got it. And he said, it doesn't tell you everything. He said that double that won in Beijing, Mark Hunter and Zach, he was out with Darren and he said, just try him the other way around. And Darren said, oh, but the telemetry says, he says, just try him the other way around, would you? Tried him the other way around, never went back.
Yeah.
And he said, it is, the technology, I mean, Brookes uses it very, very simply, I think. I'm not sure Henley worries too much about the catch angles and your feet and all that. Well, certainly don't worry about the swivel speed.
Yeah.
But they use it basically how bloody hard are you pulling and what you're doing under the water. It's that fine balance of taking the information and what you do with it.
Absolutely. And it's also maximizing the training that you have available to you because you cannot really add any more. But if you can get a few % extra benefit from each session that you're doing, then that's obviously going to add up as well. So for example, like if you do an 18K ergo, at the end, you just see how long it took you and the average split and the average rate. You don't actually see how your power curve evolved throughout the stroke when you, as you became more tired or as you progressed throughout the session. Like, do you need to work more on core engagement in the second half of the training sessions? Like, I think it could give athletes a lot of like individualized feedback onto what they specifically need to improve on. So yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say like you need to rely on it solely as the sort of like point for making a crew selection decision or anything like this. That should still be like down to the human judgment. But when it comes to maximizing the effectiveness of each session, I think there's so much groundwork to be made there.
We can be quite geeky as rowers, and we quite like a proper rower and knows their row schools and all the rest of it. But I was having this conversation with Colin, I think the other day. We had a guy at Thames. He won two Thames Cup medals in the 6th seat. He's now in the army, in the paras. And we'd always chat about, should it be UT2, should it be UT1, UT3? And I remember this guy, Ben Thomas, he was at IC, so he's a bloody bright bloke. I remember he said, I'll come down on Monday to do the long ergo, which is to 20K on a Monday, that was it. Endless debates, how hard should it be? And he said, if I was knackered, I wouldn't do it very hard. If I felt good, I'd push it on a bit. So yeah, that'll do. So that was it. That I just sort of, okay, fine. We can overthink this till kingdom come. You've still done the miles. You've done the miles. There's only so much training you do as a club rower. It's still being quite old school from Brookes. I do like the technology. I think it's interesting, but there comes a point where it's paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
You can just disappear down a rabbit hole that is completely and utterly irrelevant to all the other man management and all the rest of it. And as coaches, you say, you go up through the ranks as coaching, you get more information coming at you, and you need to know what is going to matter, what doesn't, how to process it, how to use it, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, you get lost in the data. But just what he said then, like that's him working out what everyone else sort of takes their time to work out, is that you can't go max every single day.
No.
And that consistency is going to be more important than a performance on every single session. So if that means you have to take it lighter for you. I mean, it's something like in the team, because I was right up at the bottom when I went in the senior team, just like plugging away every single day, like being knackered and getting injured and hurt my back again. And like Rob Dauncey was like, you need to chill. And it was like, it's difficult because Jurgen sat there watching every ergo, but sometimes it starts
with a 5. That's it. It's not. Yeah, it's got to be a 49.9 or whatever it is.
And we would get told, no, don't worry. There'd be some sessions where you get told, it's all good, just chill. This is just a chill one. And I remember there's one we did, and Ollie Cook had started early, and he finishes and goes and puts his score on the board, and then everyone else is still going, and Jurgen goes and looks in the board, and in front of everyone, it's like, oh, Ollie, 147, amazing. Like, that's not being done as an accident. You know what I mean? That's been like, I know what other people have said, but like, this is what I want. And yeah, being able to just identify, oh, here are the sessions that I really want to put performance in. Here are the ones where I'm going to back off. And this kind of stuff that's taken me years and sort of other people years. Like, we're talking about moving the sport forward. If something that this podcast can do is to help people click into that straight away, learn some things that's taken all of us 5, 10, 15 years to learn, maybe then they can be the guys that are going to push on and like start getting into like the other areas, which it could be interesting. I mean, the fact that you brought cycling up, I thought was interesting as well, because rowing's always billed as like, oh, it's just a rubbish spectator sport. And it's because you can't see the start and finish end. But then you look at something like cycling and they've made one of the world's biggest spectator sports out of something which, even if you're there on the day, just,
Yeah, I saw it in London,
Yeah.
in Webby in London when they came past us. It was this blur to
Yeah.
about 6 seconds. Like, oh,
Yeah.
it was cool for 6 seconds. I
Yeah.
wish I videoed it.
And then look at Henley and the drones and how that's all moving on.
Well, that's been a game changer.
Yeah.
I think the whole, what they've done there, I don't think they realise what they've done. Bringing the sport. It's also double-edged sword, because actually you go on the Friday or Saturday afternoon, there's no one watching any racing.
Yeah.
Because I'll just go and watch it on YouTube later on. I wanted to watch this race because we're racing them tomorrow. And I'll watch it Friday.
Yeah, I'd been in stewards on the Sunday, and I was like, no, I actually want to watch this one, so I need to go outside and look at my phone. Yeah, it's been a bit different. But again, I remember someone saying, I think Pinsent said, because in 2012 they had the line, they had the crane and the line with the camera on it, because that was before drones were good enough, and that was like I think they said it was like £1 million. It's like £1 million, just that one thing. So again, like technology, getting a drone to be able to.
I was in the launch with Bethan. She was coaching Leander. I had the Thames third 8, 9 o'clock, Friday morning, 2015. And with the first race, so you go down the course and they check everything, beer bottles and dead swans and, drunk people on a lilo or whatever it is. And we were coming up the track and we got to Fawley and there was the first drone race. It was the first drone over our crew. And I remember I looked to the right and there was Steve. So Steve had his foot up on the thing and he was looking up and going, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a very big thing. It's been a complete game changer, I think, in terms of obviously the way they've expanded it, brought in women and all the rest of it. I mean, it's now getting to the point. It's so big. The regatta is almost damaging rowing to some degree because everyone is so obsessed about it.
Yeah.
They've got a bit of they've opened a can of worms of Pandora's box. I don't think they quite know where it's going to go, but it is amazing. I mean, the whole regatta is obviously quite a special thing.
It's incredible to
win. Got your red box there.
Yeah.
But now they've brought user technology to bring it into people's homes. So it won't, it will be on, the red button, or it is on the red button, and all the rest of it.
I feel like they just have a big screen at Phyllis Court that then everyone in stewards can still watch it and then watch it.
That's too. I think they don't want to change the Victorian Tea Party. But if you go into the stands, they've got the TVs. They're a bit bigger than that, all the way along in the stands, so you can watch them coming up, and they're big, high-res stuff. You can see it. It's really well done. Rather than, you don't want, I remember saying, imagine if they had, sponsored by Pepsi Cola all along Phyllis Court, it'd be terrible.
Yeah. No.
But the way the stewards, as ever, they've got a good touch of doing it in a classy style.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you want to do some quick fire?
Yeah, I was going to ask, before we do quick fire, I think I just had one question, which is, combining all of your experience from all the different places that you've rowed at and coached at, what are some of your 3 top tips for success that any athlete can implement straight away?
Turn up, train hard, and have fun.
Again,
hands, body, slide. I mean, if you don't turn up, you're not going to get very good. If you don't train hard, you're not going to be competitive, and you've got to enjoy it along the way because it's a pretty boring sport at times. And then focus on the basics: hands, body, slide. I know where you want to be. Know what it is you want to do, and what it's going to take to get there, and how you're going to do that journey.
It's really good to hear it just put that simple.
I was going to say it's quick.
I went to Teddy's and Brookes, but it's something I think we do quite well actually. Brookes is just boil it down to the basics.
And again, it's
complicate it.
All points that have been repeated by people, it's repeated by people we've had on, and I think that's exciting that we can see that people who've enjoyed success share a lot of similarities. And I think that it is a bit of science and it is a bit of art, but there's a lot of it is the science, and a lot of it you can structure and you can do in a certain way.
Well, the art is using the science, isn't it?
Well,
it's how to use the something. I said managing Josh is an art. There's no science behind that. It's a business. I was thinking on the phone. That's what I'd quite like to move into, is starting a little business doing this and helping businesses simplify it. If you want to be a bit more technical, you go, well, what moves a boat? Length, power, and rate.
Yeah.
You can't change your power for the most part. rate comes with skill. The most controllable thing is length.
Yeah.
And I always think, right, that is what we can really control, is how long you're going to row. And another, mental, physical, and technical. I like to work in threes.
There are plenty of other people that have gone away and done consulting and stuff. Talking Alex Partridge obviously is doing that now, and when we have him on, that's something we're going to speak about. Lane 4 racing and those
I spoke to
things.
Greg the other week, and we had a similar comment. He said he got some good stories. He's just got to find a way of packaging, which I've now done, and I now to get up my butt after Henley and actually start doing it.
Yeah.
But it's trying to boil it down. I spoke to a friend of mine who's a pilot, and he said we were talking about Sully, Miracle on the Hudson.
Yeah.
He said, let us fly, navigate, communicate. That if you don't fly the plane, you're screwed. If you don't know where you're going, you're in trouble, and you've got to communicate. That's it. Under extreme pressure, if I was still racing, hands, body, it's like that. That's it. Do the basics well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Amazing. So, quick fires. Number 1, who's your rowing idol or the person that you've looked up to either during your career or post your rowing career?
When I was rowing, I'd probably have to say it was Tim Foster.
Nice.
He partied and he went really fast and rowed really well. I think Tim.
So he worked hard.
He turned up, he trained hard and he had fun.
And he had fun. There you go. Yeah.
Nice. What are some of the top 3 of your favorite rowing venues that you've either visited or raced at or had your crews race at?
Head of the Charles. I mean, Henley is a very, very unique thing. I've said for years, if you haven't done the Head of the Charles, Head of the River and Henley, I think you've not really done rowing properly. Doesn't matter to what level, but they are 3 very, very, the Head of the Tideway is the championship course. It's horrible for a reason, and people race on it for a reason. Henley is unique, and I think the Charles is an amazing atmosphere.
Yeah, a lot of people said we've had a few Charles.
I'm not going to put a 2,000 metre course there. Belarus was an amazing place, but I've been to some nice venues. I think those 3, they really are 3 big events that you got to do.
Nice. Generally, I like the one that I like to ask, if you could go back to the point where you first really caught the rowing bug, if you could time travel back and meet that kid, what advice would you give them knowing what you know now?
That's a very good question. I don't have ever thought of that. Don't get so bloody injured.
Yeah.
Probably.
Look up.
I mean, I said this to my son. Because the following year, I've got knee, back and shoulder, of which 2 of them were probably controllable. The back, maybe less so. But the skiing injury and the knee injury is certainly impacted. I mean, it kept me out of the Junior Worlds for a start that year, and it's like a tree, isn't it? You go up a branch, and I wanted to be over there, but I climbed up the rock. I'm over there, and I said to my son, he's like I said, he's a very good sportsman. Don't know where he'll end up going with it, but I said, just don't get in a fight with a guy on a rugby pitch where you end up getting injured, and that damages your career. So I think, and I think it would have to be actually. I would have changed that skiing route. I wouldn't have tried to do what I did. And I wouldn't have picked that fight with a fat bloke from Bedford School who then sat on my knee and damaged the growth plate, because then all those knock-on effects. I never quite found out how good I could be as a rower. And it's never massively bothered me because some of it was my own silly fault. But I never quite, at the end of the day, you want to explore how good you can be. So I think probably that, actually.
That's a good one. I mean, it's hindsight is 2020, and there's not the point to sort of go back and have any regrets, but I think it's interesting to go back and just think about what was important, what was more important that maybe you didn't realize at the time.
I could say a number of things of Henley finals and lost all the rest of it, but no, I think I'd actually go right back to the beginning. Is maybe don't worry so much about some of it, and don't go skiing.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you sign on funding.
Don't go skiing.
It's
would probably be the number 1, because if that was a big branch, that not going to the Junior Worlds, because I probably would have been in one day. I ended up rowing a few years later. I would have probably done all right. I was striking one of the fastest races in the country the following year.
Yeah.
So I clearly wasn't too bad. I think that would probably be it. Don't go skiing.
Awesome.
Which is actually, that's quite serious advice, because I remember having that at Thames. If you want to go skiing, go in early January. But I said, if you want to win Henley, don't go, because it is a dangerous sport and you can really come a cropper. Ed Coode, he did his shoulder in 02 or 03. He was doing really well, and he was cross country skiing. damaged his shoulder on one of Jurgen's cross country, because it is a very dangerous.
I'm pretty sure it's still part of the funding that you signed at the start. There's no motorbikes and no winter sports.
That's pretty sad. My dad said to me, "You get a motorbike, I'll disown you."
Yeah,
okay, fair enough.
That's what he said to me, and I've got one now.
There you go too.
He's calmed down a little bit.
Well, it comes back to controlling the controllable, doesn't it? Like, as you said just now, I could have controlled that. Instead, I ended up getting helicoptered off the mountain, ended up with a 5-inch scar on my shoulder.
Yeah, but who know? At that age, you didn't know where you were going to go or what you were going to do. I think if I was going to look back,
well, I wanted to go to the Junior Worlds that year.
That
was clear as day. I wanted to go to the Junior Worlds, and I remember lying in a Interlaken hospital. It didn't bother. I was like, "Well, you're an idiot. You're not going to the Junior Worlds." So it just I just accepted it because it was my own fault. It wasn't if someone else hit me. I might have been angry, but it was my own bloody fault, and it was controllable.
But again, then probably missing out on rowing yourself to a higher level is maybe what opened up the door for your coaching and leave a whole career out of it. And I look back, same for me. I got injured. I maybe didn't quite get as far as the aim was, but missing out on those things has pushed me in that direction. My business has grown. Like rowing has given me my livelihood, like so many friendships and like so much out of it that maybe if I'd gone straight to the top, won the Olympic gold medal and then gone and done something else, I might not have had it. So
it's an amazing sport, and you just look at the people that we know through rowing that are beyond that transcend the sport. And you get a Henley and you bump into the most amazing people.
It's being around people who are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals, and like they are the people that you want to spend time with. And the more time you spend with people like that, the more you're going to be capable of doing the same thing for yourself, I think.
We're a pretty extreme bunch, and I remember, I don't know how long we've been going now, but I do remember I took Molesey skiing in 2011, I think it was, to the cross-country skiing camp, and I said, "Right, lads, no silly buggers on the first day." Anyway, with that afternoon, we were racing each other around Blackburns. But about the end of the week, I said to the lady, "How are we getting on?" And she said, "I've had every sport here you can think of." She said, "You lot are absolutely crazy." She said, "The only people that come close were boxers and cyclists." She said, "I think you probably would beat all of them. You are absolutely nuts, a lot of you." And then she said, we did a race at the end of the week. I did the 10K and came fourth. It was like Teddington Head, to be fair. It wasn't, it wasn't exactly the national championships, and then the younger athletes did the 20K and all finishing at the top 10 or something ridiculous. And then had a week on skis. And she just said after, she said, "I've never seen anything like it." Just the work ethic.
It's work ethic. It's competition with each other. But the one thing I think it is I think the phrase gets bandied around a lot. "Oh, I'm my own worst critic." I think a lot of people say that. But I think what you'll find in rowers is they are, the critic in their head is the beast that they're trying to put down. And, like if I think about the way that, you speak to yourself about it, I couldn't speak to anyone else like that. I'd get banned or fired or whatever. And I think that's a common thing really, is we're
very hard on ourselves,
chasing our own standard. Yeah. I think that's common. I'm sure in every high performance sport, not just rowing, but
Anderson Burrell, who I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know. We were chatting at Henley last year, with Paul Cook from Brown, about exactly this sort of stuff. And Anderson said, "Rowers are not wildlife as people."
Yeah.
But no, we're really not.
He always used to tell us, "I've never met a smarter bunch of idiots." Like,
it's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, you're all very clever. A lot of them come from, great, well-educated backgrounds and stuff. And this is sort of what we were talking about. He was like, "You all do the big things great. You all kill yourselves on the ergos, but no one's out here doing an extra 10 minutes stretching, and no one's like thinking about eating a banana instead of just a burger." All those little bits where you can, like you're talking about, gain the 1%.
Like, you then come back to Jock Lewis, who founded the SAS, marching out 50 miles into the desert, drink this much water and march back. Yeah. Absolutely insane, but it proves that it could be done.
I guess the other thing, sometimes it takes other people to make things seem possible before you think it's possible for yourself. So, before anyone broke 6 minutes, I'm sure no one thought they would, or the 4-minute mark.
Well, I love the story about the 30-minute ergo. One day Cracknell said, "Right, I wonder if I can break 140, break 20, and that was it. The whole thing went from being a UT1 training session to this massive test.
Yeah.
And he just decided to go for it and see what he could do. Bang, 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 and suddenly you've got Hodgie, whatever, 136, whatever they're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, most done it at altitude.
Yeah.
And I think I remember in 07 when I joined, I remember Colin Williamson got it. And he was probably the only guy rowing at Leander that year who'd done it. And everyone was like, "Man, that's amazing." And then by the time I'd finished my career at Leander, 6-7 years later, on a weekly basis. And the standard is rising so fast. Unbelievable. Who did we joke with with John Collins, wasn't it? When I turned up Leander, I was like 87 kilos, 6'15" or whatever. And Chris Colleton was, you need to be 95 kilos and sub 6. And then I went sub 6 at about 95 kilos. And he was like, no, you need to be 5'55" at 90. And I was like, what? Like, I've just got here.
Right.
And then straight away it was like, no, 95 is out the window again. You're looking at 90, 92. Power to weight was something that came in during my career. Like people, previously, like Pinson and Redgrave were not
I was quite
looking
small,
at
so I
power
was
to weight.
big on power to weight. I was been a big champion of that.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow. Thanks so much for coming and talk to us. It's been awesome.
Thank you very much.
It's really interesting for me, obviously. I know a lot about you, and you've coached me, and
Forgotten about that bloody
Exactly.
23 bronze medal that you got.
Yeah,
Completely forgotten.
exactly. Just to see the other stuff around the outside, and it's awesome to see what you've done in the career you've done. Sort of the knowledge you bring to the table, I think, is pretty unparalleled, and I'm sure everyone will learn a lot from what we've
It
discussed.
sounds like everyone's saying the same thing, so I don't know if we're all on the
Yeah,
same track.
yes and no, but
Maybe there's a reason, it took me 25 years to get there, maybe, and it's taken some of them 5, but
there's similar themes, but there's also like the different ways you come to it. And I think, again, like a lot of the time you can say the same thing 5, 6, 7, 10 different ways. Some people will identify with the first, other people the last.
that's why I bring on the coaches. Dave, talk about Brian, and does up bloody hell, spot on.
Yeah. Awesome.
As well.
Well, I mean, I'd love to have you back on at some point if we can, and we discuss maybe bringing in some extra people, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
in the future.
It'd be
But
really interesting having a panel.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and obviously like that then will open us up to like some debates, and if we share a similar philosophy on certain things but maybe disagree on like a couple, then
Yeah.
that will be an interesting discussion.
Well, I mean, I'm doing this stuff for the OURCS next week, so I'll make sure I push the official podcast.
Yeah. We've got the first one we did was with Josh, was on like a boat race breakdown, so we've done all right with the college crowd so far.
We also did a bump special as well for the summer rates with Rory Copus.
I know
Rory. Yeah. Too small a whale for that. It's not near Rory.
Especially, you've got to know the Copi.
Yeah.
Wicked. All right. I think that concludes everything for today's episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.